Hey guys, Alex here. This is one of the biggest lore videos I have ever made. It is the complete story of the Adeptus Custodes, combining all of my Custodes videos together into one massive compilation. The goal is simple. By the end of this video, you'll understand everything you need to know about the Emperor's Golden Guardians, who the Custodes really are, how they are created, what makes them so terrifyingly powerful, their history, and whether they failed in their duties, or if the Emperor had other plans for them. This video covers everything Custodes related from the earliest days of the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade, throughout the Horus Heresy, and then the 10,000 years that followed, all the way to their modern role in the Imperium and the latest developments in the lore. Whether you've watched every Custodes video on my channel or you're discovering them for the first time, this is the definitive Adeptus Custodes experience. As always, nothing in this video was produced with AI. Every script was researched, written and revised by my team and me using more than 100 individual sources. Over the last few years, we've spent countless hours reading, comparing, debating and theorizing to create the most complete Custodes compilation possible. Enough yapping. My name is Alex and this is everything you need to know about the Adeptus Custodes. Before we take a look at how a member of the Adeptus Custodes is created, we first have to understand what a custodian actually is. Don't worry, I'll keep it short. They are the Emperor's bodyguards, his 10,000, the golden death to his enemies. The Adeptus Custodes are the Emperor's noble emissaries and pitiless executioners. Not only do they protect the Emperor, but they also guard his vaults and secrets. None within the Imperium can compare to the unwavering loyalty of the Custodes. For 10,000 years have they stood sentinel over the carrion lord of the Imperium, and for 10,000 years have they been his unstoppable rod made flesh. They are his elevated elite, with each custodian being independent and an army by themselves. They are clad in nigh impregnable aramite, with individually crafted weapons used to slay the greatest enemies of man, physically and mentally created by such arcane designs that none but the Emperor himself can ever truly understand. They slay space marines and monsters alike with horrific ease. No student of the Imperial history knows how far back in time the Adeptus Custodes can trace their origins. Even the oldest and most fragmentary accounts, recovered by Robute Gilliman's Logos Historica Verita, those that scrounge the depths of the administratum buildings for a glimpse of the true timeline of 40K, include quotes that refer to the Emperor being escorted by tall and mighty warriors clad in gold, all the way back from before the Unification Wars. The master of mankind had inherited and refreshed his memory on vast amounts of knowledge on gene forging from numerous scientist kings and techno-demagogues found all over Terra, consuming their libraries of knowledge during Old Night, back when humanity had lost contact with its empire across the stars, as the storms created by the cursed Eldari made it impossible to traverse the warp. Legend has it that the Emperor rose in power around this time, and with his unimaginable intellect, was able to make use of his attained genomantic lore. It is this, the learned few believe, that allowed the Emperor to make the Adeptus Custodes. The truth is hidden within crude cave etchings, hieroglyphic, stasis-locked scraps of parchment, and gene-sealed tomes no living person can open to this day. These fragments speak of trusted bodyguards and advisors, and great victories won against monstrous beings. Some historians know such texts exist, and are frustrated by the fact that they can never access them. Most are lost or hidden, whether that be on Terra, Mars, or a handful of other worlds in the solar system. There is a precious small amount of detail about the custodian's role during the Horus Heresy in the current day archives, which goes even beyond the usual sparsity of unauthenticated sources from that dark time. It is thought that the first Custodes leader was a warrior named Constantine Valdor, who disappeared from records right after the Horus Heresy. We, as the audience, believe he might become the King in Yellow. Some historians believe the Custodians fought against the Thousand Sons on the traitorous legion's homeworld of Prospero, and also defended the Imperial Palace during Horus's assault against the Throne World. A handful suggest that the Custodes fought their own wars within the Webway before the Siege of Terra. Now, if folk know of the Custodians at all, it is as towering golden giants who bestrode the stars at the Emperor's command, living embodiments of his holy light, given physical form, or gilded dragons of Terran myth, whose talons tore the dark demons of scripture asunder. One thing is clear, however: the Horus Heresy changed the Custodians forever. In the final stages of this horrendous conflict, the Emperor met Horus in single combat aboard the Archtrader's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. He defeated and slew War Master Horus, but was mortally wounded by him in their titanic clash. In that moment, and for the time before or since, the Custodians failed in their duty. For thousands of years after, most Custodians never left the Imperial Palace, with only a handful making preemptive strikes wherever necessary. Many donned black cloaks of mourning, and a near obsession to never leave the Golden Throne out of their sight took hold. They have ever bore the terrible shame of their failure, and have sought never to forget it, nor be absolved by it. The long vigil of the Adeptus Custodes has been one conducted by them alone in secret. Yet with the fall of Cadia, that era has ended. The Adeptus Custodes tried the stars in numbers not seen since the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. All who oppose the Emperor's will are given nothing but absolute destruction. Alright, with that delightfully dramatic intro out of the way, let's have a look at how one creates a Custodes. These guys are legendary warriors, even among the likes of Space Marines and their Primarch genefathers. So, how are they made? Where do these perfect warriors come from? How do they do it? Because if you didn't know, the Emperor used to hand make them, but somehow they can produce more without him being involved now. Well, a lot of their creation is a mystery, but what we do know is they are rare. Their psychophysical design and the intricacy and sophistication of the genecraft involved were so advanced that only the Primarchs would surpass them. Those who are recruited must not only meet insanely strict biological requirements, but also psychological levels. Only 1 in 1,000 inductees is fit to continue on, and only 1 in 1,000,000 ever makes it past their first year. From this small pool of candidates, surviving the decades of augmentation and training ahead is not guaranteed. Of course, many within the Imperium believe that the Custodes share much with the Adeptus Astartes and might even be a variant of them, but this comparison is crude. Even calling them a second or improved iteration of the Adeptus Astartes would be utterly inaccurate. In a lot of ways, they are closer to the Primarchs in their genetic build, but we will get to that in a second. If the Space Marines are the sons of the Primarchs, then the Custodians are the children of the Emperor. Potential Custodians are taken in at a very young age to better survive the rigors of their transformation. While Space Marines are taken as young children, up to as old as 10, Custodes are taken while they are still infants, usually never reaching over the age of 3. Due to the fundamental changes to their flesh, minds and souls, to become a Custodes is almost like becoming a god. The nobility of Terra during the Unification Wars and Great Crusade gave entire generations of their children to become inductees. The honor of having your child near the God Emperor, a dream for anyone to compete in. While we are not 100% sure what the rules of induction are, the child must be clear of mind, pure of soul, and a physical example to its brethren, with no imperfections within its flesh or genetic lineage. When taken, Custodes have to survive decades of alchemical and sorcerous augmentations and arcane psychological change. This creation process is brutal and known to be even more deadly than that of the Space Marines. In a way, they are using scientific sorcery with warp juices and other unknown rituals to empower the flesh and soul to take in the changes. In this way, it is essentially preparing the body to be able to undergo full transformation into a demigod. Custodes are cognitively conditioned to the point of perfection. They are required to have many talents beyond the physical, and this quite literally rebuilds their mental capacity from the ground up. Their intelligence and mindset need to be one that can rival the intellect of the Emperor himself. To comprehend more than 50,000 years of history, theories, and information that a normal man would spend lifetimes trying to understand. Every Custodian is utterly loyal, remorseless, and tireless in their vigilance. Only their duty to the Emperor must matter, with their discipline reaching so deep into their unconscious desire that they become duty. They cannot deny the Emperor, but they can question his choices. But they can indeed not disobey a command. Their psyches are so strong, their defenses are like the Imperial Palace. Their training, making them undergo thousands of hours of psycho-conditioning, psychomimetic drilling, and amnemic training, taking dozens of years before they are even allowed to consider themselves ready for their armor. So much information is poured into the minds of the Custodes that some do go insane. They must learn diplomacy, statecraft, astrogation, interstellar geography, history, philosophy, art, theosophy, artistry, and countless other subjects. Once they have mastered each of these skills, they must accept the most bitter and horrific truths of the galaxy, so they can better understand and one day defeat the most horrific of foes in existence. Some, however, cannot handle this knowledge and break under the greatest tragedies of humanity, resulting in them completely losing it. This process alone kills many thousands, but for those who survive, it leaves them unable to have dreams when they sleep. But if you thought that was it, no, there is so much more to go. Custodes undergo far more than just mental training. Every inductee is not only remade in mind, but their bodies are made at a genetic level, essentially at the level of atoms. This process involves the most advanced genecraft and alchemy, which makes that of the Space Marines look simple and crude. They lack grafted muscles and tissue, instead having these built in with their genetic reforging. Even the most minute detail of a custodian's cellular structure and genome has been redesigned to fit the Emperor's vision. They are all unique, so instead of grafting organs like we see with the legions and chapters, a custodian grows its own organs, its own strength, and is genetically rebuilt to be exactly like their master. Other than a master of mankind, only the most accomplished chirurgeons and bioalchemists can work on such warriors, doing so in golden laboratories hidden away deep under the Himalayan mountains, right under the Emperor's palace. This process is unique to each inductee, to the point that some believe even the custodian's soul is changed, like they have to link with the God Emperor himself to be able to fully transform. Those who survive come out with new personalities, physically superior and more skilled than anything else within the Imperium. Arguably, one of the last but most iconic changes to a custodian is the adoption of a new name. They choose their names from gods, monarchs, or heroes from Terra's ancient history. In this way, the custodian themselves is fashioned anew, but also bring the pride and dignity to Terra's noble houses. With no outward indication of which inductees ascended to the ranks of the Adeptus Custodes, and no hope of recognizing in these towering beings the infants they began their lives as, no Terran aristocrat can be contradicted when they claim with pride that theirs, undoubtedly, was a successful offering. Other than the protection granted to them by their new bodies and armor, each custodian is also protected from both the powers of psychers and nulls. They have a natural ignorance of the unnatural, but it should be noted however, that while being around a blank, especially the most powerful among them like the Sisters of Silence, can result in headaches and disrupt their concentration. Of the warriors of the Imperium, few get to study human culture, military and political history to the level of the Custodes. From this, they even learn the secrets of countless martial arts and subtle disciplines, which they call katas. Each has its own specialization, from entrapping their enemies to slaying entire hordes with a single stroke. But these katas also focus on esoteric disciplines such as politic, oratorial, and philosophical katas, each requiring decades, sometimes even centuries of constant studying and practice for a custodian to master. When an inductee finally ascends to stand among the Adeptus Custodes, they are given a Misericordia. These weapons of filigreed gold, molded to their unique grip, are essentially insanely dangerous knives. These weapons can slice through almost any armor with their micromolecular dissonator spirits, but they are meant for a more specific purpose. They represent the Emperor's vengeance and the change of humanity. During the darkest days of Terran history, the Misericordia was a weapon of tyranny and oppression, but in the hands of the Custodes, it represents the change the Emperor brought to Terra, and through that, the wider Imperium. Once fully inducted and the last oaths are laid, the custodian receives the rest of their gear. I have covered all individual pieces of the Custodes gear in my How Powerful is a Custodes video, but here is a quick rundown. A guardian spear with a bolt gun or other esoteric firearm, capable of cutting through even the strongest of armor. Aramite armor that can withstand most weapons found in the galaxy, rumored to even be semi-psychic resistant. And besides that, access to any and all arms found within the Emperor's personal forges, like Adratic weaponry. The Adeptus Custodes has thus become one of the 10,000. Their harsh creation process is perhaps the only reason the Custodes never exceeded that number, but some also believe that there might be more to it. But with the duty of the Custodes never complete, so do their training and preparations never end. Custodes are known for always studying or sharpening their martial capabilities when they are allowed to have some downtime. But perhaps the most significant of these pastimes is the planning and participating in the Blood Games. During these Blood Games, the Custodes attempt to assassinate the Emperor himself. For this, there have never been any rules on hows or whys. Every successful or close attempt, or well, as successful as they can be, is used to learn from and improve the defenses of the Imperial Palace. Every attempt is as unique as the Custodes who undertake them. One group during the Great Crusade simply attempted to smuggle themselves in metal bins from different continents on Terra, all the way to the Imperial Palace. All but one of these were stopped by various checkpoints, but one managed to not only succeed in breaking into the Imperial Palace, he even charged the Emperor and would have struck him with his blade, were it not for the interventions of the other Custodes present. In many other attempts, both loyal and traitor forces are also used, from Xenos Horus to Chaos Astartes, and in one attempt, a Custodian tried to teleport an Exterminatus Great Bomb directly into the Emperor's throne room, but was stopped right as they entered Terra's orbit, a group of Alaris Terminators stopping them dead in their tracks. But with that out of the way, a fun fact. Custodes don't actually have a fully functioning rank system. The moment you become a Custodes, you are perfect. Whether brand new or a veteran of many millennia, every Custodes is equal and respect is demanded for that alone. So far, it should have become obvious that the Custodes cannot be compared to normal Space Marines. But what about Primarchs? Because if you think about it, until the point of the inclusion of a couple extra organs, the introduction of a warp god in their being, and an extra deal made with the Chaos Gods on Moloch, Custodes and Primarchs are eerily similar in the creation process on a genetic level. Now, this topic by itself warrants its own video, but for now, what is important to know is that the Emperor created the Primarchs from his personal genetic material, and in turn from them, he created the Space Marines. Although not directly stated, we have seen the Primarchs make mentions of organs they share with the Space Marines, and that Belisarius Cawl created new Primaris organs in part by taking a look at the Primarchs. But do the Custodes share any organs with the Primarchs? We have seen plenty of Primarchs, practically all of them suffer wounds that should have stayed with them for a while, yet healed with incredible speed. This ability to regenerate so fast is one we don't see in the Space Marines. Yet we do see that the Custodes can still fight with similar level wounds. While none of them would survive being stepped on by a titan like Angron did, they might actually survive a needle bullet to the head like Fulgrim did in Angel Exterminatus. It is a little unclear, but in a lot of ways they are very similar. They are genetically built up from the ground up, taken as either tiny babies or even as fetuses. And at this point, they could become anything. If a warp creature or maybe a part of the Emperor's soul was shoved into these same Custodes, they may have been able to actually fight a Primarch one-on-one. Don't forget, Constantine Valdor, one of the best Custodes of all times, is nearly able to beat Alvarius in direct combat. If you're familiar with some of the more prominent characters among the Custodes, such as the aforementioned Constantine Valdor, Ra Endymion, and Diocletian Corals, you would know that the Emperor often has grander plans for individual Custodes. With every single one of them being unique, even the ones in the Era Indomitus have a purpose beyond themselves, such as Valerian. But while all of these purposes are hard to understand, even for the Custodes, none are more interesting than that of Diocletian. In the short story The Carrion Lord of the Imperium, we follow Diocletian between the Horus Heresy and right after. Yet a core part of this short story is not only the death of the Emperor, but also the nature of the Golden Throne and the Custodes. During this, we see Diocletian talk about how more or less none of the Custodes can dream except for him. Quick spoiler warning, this quote is from the Era of Ruin Horus Heresy anthology. Use the timestamps in the description to skip this part, in case you don't want to be spoiled. To my core, I am tired of these prayers, the ones whispered in monasteries that were once laboratories, the ones wheeled at the palace walls. They infest my thoughts in a way the cries of demons never could. I dream of them. I dream of the suffering cried into the skies of every world in the Imperium. I dream of an empire worth of pain and loss and zealotry and fear, all focused towards one man. Some nights, the few nights I require rest, I wake anyway, sheened with sweat and hearing the voices of men, women and children whose prayers cannot ever be answered. I don't think this is real. I am not cursed with a psyker's genetic spiral code. Nor am I a fool to believe these are anything more than portions of my slumbering mind, coming to life in ways I wish they wouldn't. They are dreams, just dreams. Tonight, I will wear gold for the first time in what seems like an eternity. I will forego the black helmet of my shame and the symbolism of my bare skin. I will instead go to my king armed and armored, the way things used to be before we failed him. I am going to ask him a question. Something I've always wanted to know the answer to. Something I regret never asking him before. At long last, Diocletian stands before his king. He looks past the hanging wires that resemble intestines, the clicking, ticking life support engines, and the preservative mist sprayed into the air in 9-second intervals. He looks past the blood bags and vitae packets, linked intravenously to the thing on the throne, which is just a chair compared to the great and grand artworks. A throne with a capital T that makes it both a curse and the salvation of the species. He looks at the revenant husk of something that was somehow once, somehow is, a man. Something that shouldn't be alive and arguably isn't, by any mortal measure. Something tortured by its own impossible continuation, physically starved and physically bloated on the feasting of souls. It's forced to devour every day for its endless and agonizing existence. The weight of the centuries lies heavy on Diocletian's shoulders, here in these quiet seconds between a warrior and his liege. He feels the weight of his failure to protect his man, the knowledge that had the 10,000 done what was needed of them, then the Emperor would still be with them. Their king would still be a man, not a skeleton silently screaming into the midnight reaches of the universe to just give humanity a few more millennia. Diocletian lifts his gaze. He stares into what is left of his king's features, and in that moment, they appear as two sides of a coin. Created and creator. An ageless countenance opposing a living carcass. Each breath he takes draws the scent of the throne into his body, a stinging reek of overworked metal, unable to entirely mask the fainter smells of alchemical solutions and biological waste. Beneath it all, and worst of all, is a wisp of decay. Diocletian rests his spear before the God Emperor's feet, and he asks his question. My king, do you dream? So this highlights a very strange genetic issue with the custodians. Maybe it was designed, but why can't they normally dream? Did the Emperor turn this off so they would only see his dreams? Or is there a deeper issue, where the Emperor himself might not actually be able to dream, but is the dream instead? Talking about genetic instabilities, although custodians are incredibly long-lived to the point of essential immortality, they do have a retirement system, in case they age too far or get damaged in the process of their long vigil.
However, to understand custodian retirement, there is one element to the Custodes that you must first know. You see, custodians have a philosophy, a unanimous belief that is shared across all custodian shield hosts, the reverence of physical and mental perfection. This reverence of perfection is shown to us across a bounty of novels and codices. However, we hear Shield Captain Valerian internally monologue about it in Watchers of the Throne, Regent Shadow, the 2020 novel. Valerian briefly contemplates about what is most core to a custodian, and muses on the notion that a member of the Custodes will not do a thing, or undertake a task, if that member of the Custodes cannot do that thing, or that task, perfectly. This actually ties in wonderfully with some knowledge given to us in the 7th edition Custodes Codex, which tells us that there is no infighting, hazing, or disrespect handed out between the warriors of the Golden 10,000. Because as soon as a custodian is created, their augmentations completed, they are considered perfect, physically, mentally, and philosophically. Unlike the Space Marines who are blighted by infighting and bickering, and the usual tripe associated with being a superhuman child soldier, the Custodes have no such failings. Even the Emperor's Primarchs fail in this same regard where the Custodians do not. For to be a Custodian is to be perfect, and to know a Custodian is to know a perfect being, even if you yourself are a Custodian. Now you might be asking, what does this have to do with Custodes retiring? Simply put, if a warrior of the Golden 10,000's perfection is cracked, chipped, or diminished in even the most minor capacity by creed and culture, that warrior ceases to be a Custodian. This can manifest in many forms. Of course, many of you watching will already be aware of how the 8th edition Custodes Codex informs us that when a Custodian reaches a certain age, their reaction times may slow by 1/16 of a second, which to a human or even a Space Marine may be considered negligible. Yet, to one of the Golden 10,000, it is a signifier that their vigil has indeed come to an end. Though something that's glossed over in the 8th edition codex is that this is also true of Custodes who've taken on bionics, an augmetic hand, or an optic implant, etc, etc. Any example of a Custodian being less than as perfect as the day they were born anew is enough. The same codex shows us an image of an ex-Custodian, not aged beyond reason, but instead rebuilt with various cybernetics. These less than perfect Custodians become something called the Eyes of the Emperor. It's considered relatively common knowledge amongst Warhammer 40K enthusiasts that the Eyes of the Emperor are essentially just superhuman spies. As the 8th edition codex says, they go out into the galaxy adorning great black robes to report and inform the Captain General, the Master of the Custodes, on various uprisings and the like that could threaten the sanctity of Terra. However, we know from the 10th edition Custodes Codex that this is really just scratching the surface of what Eyes of the Emperor actually do. We know from Watchers of the Throne Regent Shadow that these ex-Custodes have total autonomy when they go out into the galaxy, answering to no one but the Captain General, the Emperor of Mankind, and maybe Rabute Gilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines. And coming back to the 10th edition codex, we know that spy work and running spy networks is something that only some of the Eyes of the Emperor actually do. In truth, the Eyes of the Emperor can do almost anything, at least almost anything that they think will benefit Terra. We know there are ex-Custodians who are posing as cult leaders, demagogues the Codex describes them as. We know that there are ex-Custodians who work in the Administratum as high adepts, basically using their intellect that is so great in its creation that it's surpassed only by the Primarchs, to look out for corruption and heresy in the droves of bureaucracy that the Imperium is famed for. There's even Eyes of the Emperor who have become Inquisitors, using the combined authority as emissaries of the God Emperor of Mankind, and that of the impossibly long reach of the Inquisition for untold ends. Hell, since the breaking of the Great Rift, there's ex-Custodes in Imperium Nihilus, the dark side of the galaxy, who've been forced to rule entire worlds in the stead of corrupt planetary officials. In truth, the community's understanding of the Eyes of the Emperor at large barely touches the surface of what they're actually capable of. They are so much more than mere spies. The 10th edition codex even tells us that they are able to take their Custodian weaponry and armor with them into their new role as Eyes. If you want to know more about the Eyes of the Emperor, I've got a half-hour deep dive into every bit of sourced lore we have on the Eyes of the Emperor over on my channel. The link will be in the description down below. There's even a warband of ex-Custodians that have come together to fight chaos in one of the most remote regions of the galaxy, essentially forming what could be an unofficial shield host. With all that being said though, not all Custodians who've lost their title of perfect are able to become Eyes of the Emperor. You see, unlike the Astartes, individual Custodians are given immense amounts of autonomy. This is described to us in their 9th edition codex and various Horus Heresy novels, where on the battlefield they don't typically fight as units. Each Custodian fights his own war on his own terms. However, as mentioned in Regent Shadow, this autonomy stretches into their quote-unquote retirement as well. The 8th edition Custodes Codex even says that when faced with the reality that they are no longer perfect and must become Eyes of the Emperor, some of them will deny themselves that honor. Instead, a Custodian who considers himself a warrior who has done misdeeds or has dishonored himself or the Emperor will instead demand to be interred within a dreadnought. As mentioned earlier in this video, the education of the Custodes is without flaw or limit. All information mankind has to offer is presented to them, from philosophy to art to war. So when a Custodian who is not on death's door, but is merely unable to maintain that personal philosophy of perfection, demands to be butchered and mutilated to be placed within a venerable sarcophagi. It should tell you just how unwavering their indoctrination from creation to uphold perfection is to their vocation. We see more of this reverence of perfection even beyond this point when you continue to compare the Custodes to the Space Marines. In a Space Marine chapter, the two most likely dreadnoughts you'll find yourself within are either Castaferum dreadnoughts or Redemptor dreadnoughts. These are both epic, terrifying war machines in their own right. Though within a Space Marine chapter, there are relic dreadnoughts that are held in much higher esteem, one of which is known as the Contemptor dreadnought, a relic of untold destruction that has seen zero production for 10,000 years. The few Space Marine chapters that are lucky enough to have one or maybe even two of these venerable walkers treat them with untold reverence. However, to the Custodes, the Contemptor dreadnought is the bottom of the barrel. Whilst they can be inhabited by great custodian heroes, such as Historius Calaxor, a great custodian Contemptor dreadnought older than even Bjorn the Fell-Handed, the Venerable Contemptor is also the frame used to house custodians who bear a shame that bars them from being unable to join the Eyes. In truth, a custodian, when given the opportunity, would much rather exist within an Achilles or Galatus, or even the Telemon pattern dreadnought. All Custodes exclusives, each one a weapon of destruction crafted over multiple lifetimes of master artificers and master artisans of terror. Even in shame and dishonor, the Custodians' need for perfection has them outshine even Space Marine heroes.
To round this video out, we have to take a look at a rather controversial question, but it has to be asked. Are the Custodes the future of humanity, or are they just a new type of mutant? This is the perfect moment to mention the gene terrors of Old Night. While we all know of the cybernetic revolt and the wars humanity fought against the AI robot men of iron, few people actually know of the gene terrors as a whole, which yes, played out at the exact same time. In many books, we see the Imperium prosecute mutants to an extreme level. Even when Horus encountered the Interrex, many of his officers were disgusted at them being mutants that had changed their genetic code. During the Dark Age of technology, scientists had discovered many potentials within the human genome, which resulted in the fusing of human and alien biology and much more. Some of these experiments remain, such as the semi-stable Ogrins and Navigators, while others thankfully disappeared or were destroyed by the Emperor and his legions of gene-crafted monsters. But when the Dark Age of technology ended in an apocalypse of war and terror, as the Masters fought their creations in the shapes known to us in legend as the Men of Stone and the Men of Steel, the anarchy and destruction of widespread psyker emergence brought the dominion of mankind crashing down. The weapons of these times were left strewn across the worlds, left to rot or influence that which lived around it. Nowhere was this more apparent than on Terra itself, the seat and capital of that ancient empire, and storehouse of its secrets. For centuries, such dread secrets slumbered. In forgotten bunkers and armored vaults lay the masterless gene looms and autosurgical chambers of the Dark Age of technology, waiting for the ignorant and the power-hungry to set them to work once more to bloody and ill-reckoned purposes. This would result in even more violence, anarchy, and environmental collapse on old Earth. Genetically tailored viruses in wars became the norm. Immortality was bought with blood, and grotesque shock troops fought for crazed warlords all across Earth's burnt crust. Mutation, monstrosity, pogrom, disease and death unimaginable were let loose by the warlord's lust for conquest. Such was Terra's long night. By the time of the coming of the Emperor, to finally quell the endless war, splice-wrought and muscle-grafted warriors were the common currency of war, amid the techno-barbarian tribes and mercenary clans, which dominated much of desolate ancient Terra, while degenerate, gene-damaged mutants and abhumans haunted the ruins and waste beyond the holdfast of petty empires. The more extreme children of the Dark Age of technology were also a fearful legend which haunted, all too real, the dreams of men. Be they the Excubari Vivamorphs or the Ka-Marg, who cult the young for beautiful flesh to graft to their own failing bodies, or the nightmare horrors of the Gourmand clans, of the Deep Sinks of the Detramerica, whose terrible strength and longevity were bought only at the price of a far more indiscriminate and insatiable hunger. Yeah, they were genetically created vampires. To break the rule of the foulest abominations humanity has ever produced, the Emperor created the Thunder Legions, fighting fire with fire. The Emperor would inherit the terrors of Genecraft and turn it to his own goals. From it, he forged his angels, while lesser men created mutilated monsters. But this is not the only legacy from these gene-crafted dogs of war. With their widespread usage, mutants and abhumans found all over the galaxy, the very base human genome was damaged. So at this point, aren't we all mutants? Now, I could explain this, but it is best to show this through the following excerpt from the Internet Dev when Sanguinius asks the Emperor questions about what he will do to his tribe's genetics, resulting in the Emperor giving the Primarch the following vision. I am the end product of centuries of a great work, he comprehends, marveling. Me, my brothers, our sons, all of our kind, we are the culmination of a great work, and that work is nothing less than the salvation of human biology. I see the beautiful young world below has grown older and darker now, stained with damage and woe. The void around me has grown blacker, suffocating. The age of strife and long night have come and gone, woefully damaging the human genome. It has fallen prey to grim genetic drift and degenerative mutation rates. The great work is not just to unify Terra and rebuild the infrastructure of an empire. It is to rebuild the human vessel itself, to repair molecular codes, to arrest mutation, and when necessary, select for positive trait alterations. Pinprick specks of light flicker on the surface of the world, increasing in number. Like the first shoots of spring from hard winter ground. They multiply. They flicker out among the stars too. They are minds, psychers, proliferating unchecked. They are a deeply destructive flaw. But the emergent navigators are essential. Sanctioned genetic reconstruction is crucial for human growth. And in pursuing it, my father reached a profound understanding of human biological structure and function. Eons subdivide, centuries turn over, one by one, like tarot cards on a table. As they turn, rationality has to remain paramount. But emotions, though unruly and forever unpredictable, are still mankind's greatest assets. Long years of neuro-research showed my father this beyond doubt. The human mind is an astoundingly powerful instrument. We are capable of almost anything. The Emperor of Mankind, beloved by all, was a being of such power that not even the immortal Perpetuals could keep up with his plans and dreams for humanity. Yet the Emperor did not intend to reunite humanity and face down the forces of chaos all by himself. And if no one was worthy enough to lead the Emperor's armies, and no one could truly stand beside him, he would create them with his own hands. The first of these were the Custodes, warriors created to be the perfect companions and confidants of the Emperor. These warriors alone were permitted to know the Emperor's true plan, a caste of soldiers to stay by his side and stop at nothing to protect him. Yet, the Custodes were so much more than just bodyguards. To ensure their master could never be threatened by any means, the Custodes became masters of politics, assassination, and even studied history and philosophy. To be a companion to the greatest mind humanity has ever produced was a task only suited to those whose very essence was to fulfill this singular purpose. Before the Emperor even conceived of the idea of the Primarchs, it was them he asked for their opinions. Many argued that the Imperium must be built by the flesh and blood of mortal humans. If humanity needed guidance, then let the Emperor and his most trusted of agents lead their armies. Although most Custodes argued for hours against the creation of the Primarchs and the stealing of the fire of the Dark Gods, they still accepted the Emperor's decision without hesitation, even if they thought he was wrong. Where the custodians were diplomats, bodyguards and confidants, the Emperor created the Primarchs to be his warlords, warriors without equal, and natural leaders with indomitable will to dominate over all others. Lionel Johnson was a destroyer, a weapon reserved for the most deserving of enemies. Others, like Sanguinius or Robute Guilliman, would elevate humanity to awe-inspiring levels of courage and honor on the battlefields, while some of the Primarchs, like Angron or Conrad Curse, were weapons with which to punish, rip and tear all those who dare to stand in the way of progress. All the Primarchs were so much more than just warlords with which to conquer the galaxy. Perturabo was a man of science, a brilliant architect turned bloody tool. Magnus's quest for knowledge was one that never ended. Others like Fulgrim and Vulcan were compassionate leaders. They commanded their sons to glory, but to also ensure they would raise the common man with them. As Fulgrim once said, "Look at them, my sons. You are the highest, and they the lowest. It is your duty to raise them as high as they will go. Anything less is not worthy of you." Even the brutal Chthonian gang lord Horus was not blind to compassion before his fall. Yet, if the Custodes and Primarchs understood the Emperor's vision, created to unite humanity, why is there so much animosity between them? Like, they just keep fighting in the lore. For every quality shared between the Custodes and the Primarchs, there are a dozen differences that fundamentally oppose each other. Perhaps the first and foremost of these was the level of trust given to them by the Emperor. When the Thunder Warriors needed to be destroyed, the Emperor handed this duty to his custodians instead of the first ever Space Marines. While the Emperor shared his vision for humanity with each of his sons, he only ever shared the journey with his Custodes. For every secret the Emperor shared with his Primarchs, he shared even more with his Golden Companions. After all, the Custodes destroyed the Thunder Warriors and were trained from the very beginning to be able to kill the Space Marines. And indeed, this might even have to extend to the Primarchs one day. And in the novels, like in Era of Ruin, right after the Horus Heresy has ended, one of the greatest Custodes to have ever lived, Tribune Diocletian, considers whether he could take on Robute Guilliman or not. Diocletian stops moving, he stops breathing, he is an animal in that very moment, a thing of urges and desires, frozen in place as he feels his heartbeat quicken. If he isn't careful, if he doesn't master his instinct and his rage, then the Imperium will lose another Primarch this day. He isn't convinced that wouldn't be for the best. Perhaps it would be, but he doesn't believe it's his decision to make. The others sense it too. It passes between every talon in the chamber, as wordless and true as a sister's hand signals. He sees Hado shift position, ever so slightly adjusting his balance. He sees Caria tilt her head a fraction of an inch, and by her thigh, she taps her first finger against the tip of her thumb in silent signal. They will join him in battle. He sees others, custodians and sisters, in absolute harmony and absolute unity. If he acts now, they will act with him before the courageous and honorable Fools in Blue can even aim their bolters, and then they can kill Guilliman. But could the Custodes really beat the Primarchs? Are the 10,000 all bark and no bite? Or could they actually defeat the very sons of the Emperor? To truly understand how a fight between the Custodes and Primarchs would go, we first need to get a better sense of how they fight, act, think, and just how strong they really are. For the Custodes, I have already covered them in painful detail in my How Powerful Are Custodes video, so I will keep their explanation short in this one, but we will still hit all the beats that matter to this video. Custodes are formidable warriors, oftentimes a literal golden blur of movement and depth. Each custodian fights his own battle, doing so not only because they are capable of such feats, but because it is required of them. Their formations are fluid, but also a bulwark against a raging ocean. At the height of their power, during the Great Crusade, Custodes were followed by artificers and arsenal trolls who reloaded the weapons of their masters while they continued fighting. To stand among these warriors was to share mutual respect for experience and gifts beyond comprehension. To this day, few, if any, orders ever need to be barked by their leaders. The Custodes simply focus on their slaughter and nothing else. This individualism, however, does come with a unity of purpose. Two separate Custodes never get in each other's way. Sometimes their weapons pass mere inches away from their fellow custodians to hit an enemy from an angle they thought impossible. There is a story of a tech priest who once witnessed the 10,000 fight during the Horus Heresy, who noted how there was an inherent defensiveness in the initial moments when the Custodes fought their enemies. In these precious first few seconds, each custodian measures and judges their foes and almost always finds them to be wanting. In truth, Custodes can overpower any enemy, crushing them with superior strength or speed, and then move on to the next. But where's the value in that? Instead, they take this split second to learn from each fight, understanding their enemies' patterns, and from that, create an artistic strike that perfectly bypasses their defenses, kind of like learning the attack pattern of a boss in Elden Ring. However, are there any inherent weaknesses in how the Custodes fight? What could a Primarch exploit and use against them? Well, as seen in The First Heretic, the Wordbearers quickly uncovered their greatest flaw. There's something about the way they fight, some flaw that I can't make out. Argoltal watched Aquilin, the custodian's blade reaving its way through countless lives, and saw nothing of the kind. He said so. Torgal shook his head, still watching. I can't form the thought. They lack something. They're fighting wrong. And at this time, as soon as Argoltal returned his gaze to the battle in the street, he saw it instantly. The way the Custodes fought almost seemed identical to the Astartes. It took a trained eye to see the subtle differences. The captain had missed it at first by focusing on a single warrior. The moment he took in the full view, there, I see it too. Was it a flaw? Perhaps by the standards of the Astartes, who waged war and lived life with brotherhood etched into their genetic codes. But Custodes were the sons of the most rarefied and time-consuming process, the biological manipulation that gave birth to the Emperor's guardians, bred warriors who weren't shackled by bonds of loyalty to anyone except their imperial overlord. They're not brothers. Watch how they move. See how each one fights his own war. Alone, unsupported by the others. They're not like us. These are warriors, not soldiers. The thought made his skin crawl. It must have had the same effect on Torgal, for he voiced the words on his captain's mind. Lions. They're lions, not wolves. Hunting alone instead of as a pack. A golden pack, he added and tapped the chestplate of his armor. Not grey. Good eyes, brother. Argoltal still stared intently. Now that he was aware of the disunity, it was all he could focus on. Here was a weakness, a savage one, masked only by the heroic skills of each warrior and the wordlessness of the enemies they faced. A ripple of unease shivered through him as he bore witness. Those ancient words of the Emperor came to him, the first creed of the Legiones Astartes, and they shall know no fear. Argoltal was one of those who took the creed in its most literal sense. Believing the sensitivity to feel fear was rewritten out of him at the genetic level. But even so, watching these brotherless cousins fight chilled him to the core. They lacked so much, despite their individual perfection. In standing free of brotherhood, they also sacrifice its strengths, the tactics of a pack, the trust in those who fight by your side. I suspect the secrets woven into their body and blood gene bind them to a higher loyalty. Perhaps their only brother is the Emperor himself. For all the individual might of the Custodes, the word-bearers are right. Although terrifying individual combatants, they really struggle fighting together. They lack the unity and teamwork that the sons of the Primarchs naturally exhibit. If you'll excuse me, I need to go on a little side tangent here. Due to how Custodes are portrayed as the guardians of the Emperor, many people assume that they kind of work like the IG-100 Magna Guards from Star Wars, where, for example, 4 of them surround a helpless Jedi, attacking from all sides at once, and as the noble warrior is disarmed by the main Magna Guard, all 3 others immediately zap him with their electrostaff, incapacitating or outright killing them. For how cool this looks in episode 3, Custodes sadly do not fight like that. As Argoltal says, they are lions. They will fight their enemy one by one, learning their patterns, showing it to their brothers, and one by one, they get better at fighting their target. But back to the power level of individual Custodes, it is pretty well understood that in a one-on-one fight, Custodes make short work of Space Marines. In fact, we have many examples of this. From Ra and Dimian fighting World Eaters in the Webway, to Valerian facing the Black Legion in the skies of Terra. During these fights, we often see Custodes take on multiple Astartes at once. In some cases, it's almost easy. Custodes are very powerful, but they have their flaws. Now let's take a look at how strong Primarchs are. Of course, there are 20 or 21 of them, and each of them is essentially completely different in their fighting style and general skill level. But there are still a lot of common traits between them. Reading over 60 Horus Heresy books has shown me that Games Workshop writers all love making the Primarchs absolutely ridiculous. Custodes fight with their own unique methods, but in contrast to this, each Primarch has their own unique and very distinctive fighting style. While Custodes should never underestimate Space Marines, Primarchs face very little challenge when fighting one. Few moments in the Siege of Terra are as iconic as when Sigismund charged Fulgrim, the greatest duelist Astartes to have ever lived, wounded the demon Primarch, but then was instantly swatted aside like a child. Also earlier in the Heresy, Angron even baited Argoltal into a fight, but when the leader of the Galverbach jumped at Angron, he was caught mid-air and just thrown away like he was nothing. Even Karn during the Siege of Terra would have his own moment of being swatted away by Rogel Dorn, who didn't even give him a second thought. The number of times Primarchs have killed Space Marines or made them look like children is almost too numerous to cover in this video. But are there any moments where a Space Marine, or maybe even a half Astartes, actually properly hurts a Primarch? Well, there is a surprising duel between Corferin and Guilliman, as seen in Know No Fear, where a man who has been turned into a half Astartes nearly kills the Primarch of the 13th. Corferin, master of the dark fate, master of the unspeakable word, orders his men forward. Then he flies at Guilliman, trailing dark vapor, coruscating with black energies, torn from the pits of the warp. Bastard! Guilliman howls. He does not flinch, not for a second. Corferin greets Guilliman with a beam of smoke light, a column of wretched darkness that bursts from the palm of his right hand and smashes the 13th Primarch into the chamber wall. Guilliman gets back up, but he is shaken. The wall is crumpled where he struck it. Corferin cries out, a bark of straining effort, and manufactures another ray of smoke light. Guilliman is charging, but the beam slams him back into the bulkhead with a kinetic slap so powerful that it rings out with a deafening sonic boom. Guilliman staggers up, falls, and then half rises, clenching his power fist. The ceramite of his breastplate is cracked. Guilliman coughs, and blood drips from his mouth. He tries to stand. Corferin blasts him again, this time with a weird, negative electricity that crackles around Guilliman and causes him to seize in violent spasms. Guilliman is left on his hands and knees, his cobalt blue plating scorched, his head bowed, his whole form smoldering as the superheated armor burns his skin. The word-bearer draws his atame and steps forward. Corferin stoops beside the crumpled Primarch. Guilliman is breathing fast and ragged, his armor smokes, discolored, and his blood pools beneath him. Ultimately, what saved Guilliman was not his power as a Primarch, but instead Corferin's supreme arrogance in trying to corrupt him. While Guilliman bled from the atame, cutting his throat, he managed to cripple Corferin with a single punch when he was gloating. Although it is pretty obvious that Corferin was able to demolish Guilliman using sorcerer's powers besides his semi-Astartes frame, there is also the time the Alpha Legion tried to assassinate the Primarch of the Ultramarines. During this fight, a group of assassins came to an unarmed Guilliman, pretending to be Ultramarines, and ambushed him with bolters. During this assassination attempt, Guilliman began to dodge incoming bolter rounds, flinging furniture at his attackers to allow him to counterattack. His attackers managed to wound him. One of the assassins was grabbed by Guilliman and used as a shield. When this unfortunate Alpha Legionary died to friendly fire, Guilliman reached for his gladius. With his new weapon, Guilliman killed 2 assassins, but in return, their bolters finally started hammering him. When he reached for a bolter to fire back, there was enough concentrated fire to force him back. Guilliman hurled a stone bust of Connor, killing his 4th assassin. Then he threw the gladius, killing a 5th. The palace guards were at the door, but the Alpha Legionaries had overridden the access codes, making it difficult for the Victrix Guard to save their Primarch. Guilliman killed a 6th assassin and finally retrieved a bolter. After shooting his 7th assassin, another managed to punch his gladius into Guilliman's side. With a single punch, this assassin was sent flying as well, but his gladius was still stuck in Guilliman. More bolter shot hit the Primarch, blinding him from the concussive force. Another assassin came at Guilliman's throat with his sword, and Guilliman killed him with a bolter after taking a wound, with the only remaining assassin being a wounded warrior crawling on the floor for a weapon. Guilliman finished the fight. He then dropped to his knees, and he almost died. Besides all this combat prowess, Primarchs also exude an aura of raw fear, which, yes, makes even Space Marines feel true fear. When the traitor legions committed their first act of betrayal on Istvan III, Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children fled when he saw Angron charge his sons. He fled because the loyalist World Eaters told him that this was not his fight. He fled so he could regroup with his brothers. But more importantly, he fled because Angron made him feel fear. Even Icona Sharokin, a Raven Guard who had almost succeeded in killing Fulgrim, was grateful when coming face to face with Alfarius, who luckily had no interest in fighting him. Now that we have covered the general abilities of both Primarchs and Custodes, how do these two creations of the Emperor usually interact? Why would they fight in the first place? Have they ever talked about it? Maybe even given some in-lore opinions on who would win? Well, the answer is both complicated, but also straightforward. Before the Emperor created the Primarchs, he gathered his most trusted custodians and asked them for their opinions, with most, if not all, of them speaking against the creation of the Primarchs. Yet the Custodes are also the most loyal servants the galaxy has ever seen, and so would still fight alongside the Primarchs during the Great Crusade. The Custodes often preferred to keep their distance from the Primarchs. Valdor was not the biggest fan of Alfarius, something we will cover in a moment, but during the Siege of Terra, he formed an incredibly strong bond with both Sanguinius and Rogel Dorn. Yet other Custodes, such as Aquilon, who was sent to watch over Lorgar after the burning of Monarchia, considered him a weakling Primarch. He and the Custodes who joined him almost had open contempt for the Primarch of the Wordbearers. And yes, they truly believed they could kill him if they had to. Before all of the Chaos corruption happened, of course. The Horus Heresy would, however, change the dynamic between the Primarchs and Custodes even more. What used to be a distant respect for the sons of the Emperor grew into bitter mistrust and hatred for them and the Space Marines. Even when the Emperor was freshly interred upon the Golden Throne, the Custodes almost came into direct conflict with Roboute Guilliman. The Primarch had arrived late to the siege of Terra, having found a broken Imperium and swiftly wrestled power away from all others so he might save his father's creation. An act that left a bitter taste in the warriors who had actually fought during the siege of Terra. Earlier in this video, I already covered a part of this excerpt to set the tone for this script, but let's now take a look at the full excerpt from the Carrion Lord of the Imperium short story from the Era of Ruin anthology, as this perfectly encapsulates what the Custodes truly see in the Primarchs and how they all believe they could kill the sons of the Emperor, even with small forces of their golden 10,000. It is the final days of the Primarchs and their legions. Soon they will be exiled from Terra as the new leaders of the Imperium close the tome of history on the age of gods and demigods. A new age of stagnation and fear is dawning, built over the bones of truths best left forgotten. Diocletian is going to kill Roboute Guilliman. He knows it with the surety that he's ever known anything, that unless the self-proclaimed Lord Commander of the Imperium doesn't fall silent at once, Dio and the custodians at his side and the remaining furtive, persecuted sisters in this grand chamber will draw their blades, and they will kill the creature that believes itself the heir of the Empire. Time and time again, they have endured Guilliman's speeches, his declarations of intent, his orders that counter even the wishes of his own brothers, to the point where they are already whispering of another war. A war, this time, over Guilliman's vision of the Imperium. Are you listening, Diocletian? I call for unity, at a time when we need it most. Diocletian is listening. He doesn't hear calls of unity, he hears demands of obedience. The time they most needed unity was decades ago, when half of Guilliman's breed set the galaxy aflame. Are you finished? Diocletian asked softly. Are you done? This is how Diocletian looks to the world outside of his brothers and sisters. He is almost entirely without warmth and without honor. His genetic lessers irritate him, and he regards no being as his genetic superior. He is decisive, authoritative, and absent of all patience. I grow wary of your mistrust, says Roboute Guilliman, savior of Terra, lord of the armies of humanity, avenging son of the Emperor, and then he says Diocletian's title, which was once Ra's title, in a tone of voice that, to human ears, is perfectly smooth, perfectly calm. Tribune. My mistrust, Diocletian repeats. His tone is that of a man seeking clarity. He wants to be sure he heard what he thinks he heard. My mistrust. There was so much Diocletian wanted to say, but naming the sins of the Primarchs would take so long, the very light of soul would burn out before he was finished. You say the Emperor would trust you now with the resurrection of the Imperium. If he trusted you, why did he need 10,000 bodyguards? And why weren't you one of them? Why weren't you called upon the defense of the webway? Why did he entrust that most vital task to his true chosen? Why, whenever he related the truth of the galaxy, was it never his sons that he told? Diocletian could say all of this, and it would be so satisfying. Instead, Diocletian leads the talons away from Guilliman. Carrie, a sister of silence, would even tell Diocletian she smelled the stink of defeat on Guilliman. She believed he would die soon. Diocletian would speak prophetic words, telling her the Primarchs were not built to last forever. And indeed, years later, Roboute Guilliman would almost die at the hands of Fulgrim and be placed in stasis for nearly 10 full millennia. From how Diocletian reacts and thinks, it is more than obvious that he had enough Custodes and Sisters with him to kill Robute Guilliman and the Ultramarines who guarded him. How many were there with him? We do not know. There could have been a dozen, maybe 100 in total, but the talons of the Emperor are still some of the most lethal tools the Emperor has at his disposal. But while Diocletian chooses to walk away from a fight with Guilliman, there have been several times the Custodes and Primarchs actually fought. Let's take a look at every canon example of when Custodes and Primarchs have fought. Alpharius versus Valdor. Supposedly, Alpharius attempted to recreate what an assassination on the Emperor would look like before the Great Crusade even began. During this, Alpharius stole the armor and weapons from a Custodes and took aim at the Emperor. But before he could take his shot, he noticed Constantine Valdor was missing and suddenly found himself dueling the Captain General of the Custodes on a nearby rooftop. We get to see this fight from Alpharius' perspective, as seen in Head of the Hydra. I realized Valdor was not present with the welcoming party a moment before instinct made me throw myself forwards, and the sizzling power blade of the Apollonian spear sliced through the overhang under which I'd been sheltered. I came back up to my feet, balancing on the spine of the roof, and Constantine Valdor came at me like a golden thunderstorm. Despite his size, despite the bulk of his armor, he moved as smoothly as a dancer along the narrow ridge. He was the Emperor's greatest champion, Terra's mightiest warrior, and peerless in combat. So far. The Guardian Spear I held was not manufactured to the same standards as my adversary's weapon, but neither was it a feeble twig. I met him blade to blade, countering and parrying each of his thrusts, then responding in kind. He matched me, his guard as good as my own, then knocked my blade aside and thrust for my heart. It was a killing blow. I somersaulted over it, clearing Valdor and lashing out with my spear at his back as I did so. I expected his suit to superbly crafted aramite to turn the blow, at least enough to avoid him taking any serious harm. I did not expect him to be able to withdraw the Apollonian spear from his thrust in time to parry my slash, and then turn to face me as I landed on my feet, facing him in turn. I smiled then, for this truly was a test. While this fight ends with Malcador ordering them to stop, it is rather impressive to see Valdor, the greatest of the Custodes, be an actual match for Alpharius, who is perhaps the least of the Primarchs in matters of combat, but at the same time, still a Primarch. Don't forget though, Dorn did slay Alpharius at the Battle of Pluto, without really breaking a sweat. But there is no death in this one. What does it look like when a Primarch truly tries to kill the Golden Guardians? Angron versus Custodes. When Angron was found by the Emperor, the master of mankind found only the ghost of a Primarch, a broken gladiator unwilling to serve. The Emperor's psychic powers caused Angron's nails to flare up, biting down hard, and because he was preparing himself for a battle, he lashed out at the first figure who approached him. A lone custodian was grabbed, torn in half from collar to groin in a single movement. A dozen or more custodians leveled their guardian spears at him and slowly approached. Angron saw dozens of flaws and weaknesses he wanted to exploit, but before he could kill even more, the Emperor stopped him. Okay, so Primarchs can tear through Custodes with their bare hands, ripping them in half with very little resistance. Also, apparently, Primarchs can immediately recognize flaws in their enemies, giving them an edge over what the Custodes do, which is to learn through fighting and trial. Primarchs can essentially see this before the fight even happens. And lastly, Dorn versus Custodes. Although it seems odd to think that Rogel Dorn would fight the Custodes, during the Horus Heresy, he had a single standoff with them. Two of the custodians, Amon and Hado, were investigating a powerful man on Terra named Pharaon Sishar, and when they discovered him to be a traitor, they came to arrest him. Yet as they did, Rogel Dorn arrived with rather grim news, as seen in Blood Games. Ferrum Sishar is a traitor and spy. He is using the networks of his extensive mercantile empire to communicate with the War Master and his benighted rebels. We have just cause and evidence enough to hold him and interrogate him. He will come with us. Or, asked Dorn with a soft, almost amused smile. He will come with us, my lord, Amon insisted. Dorn nodded. An object lesson in determination and loyalty, eh, Archimus? Indeed, my lord, replied the commander of the Huskarls. They would fight 6 Astartes and a Primarch in order to accomplish their duty. My lord, please stand aside. I am half tempted to let you attempt to go through me. I would, of course, hurt you both. You would try, my lord, Hado added. Enough. Archimus, the retinue commander stepped forward. Lord Sishar of High Brasil is a spy. Lord Sishar of High Brasil has been in regular communication with Horus Lupercal and has exchanged with the traitor a great deal of intelligence. But Lord Sishar was also a double agent employed by Rogol Dorn. But the investigation of the Custodes caused him to be compromised. Rogol Dorn had grown frustrated with the Custodes to a certain degree during the heresy. He did not enjoy their secrets, the preferential treatment from the Emperor, and the complete lack of communication, which caused Dorn to lose a very useful double agent. Although the standoff between Dorn and the 2 Custodes can also be seen as both sides kind of testing each other, rather than actually threatening, it is a good reminder that no matter what, the Custodes only ever served the Emperor. So let's finally answer the question, how many Custodes does it take to kill a Primarch? Well, there are a few things we can mention to help us paint a better picture. The first of these is the Oculi Imperator, the Custodes sent to watch Lorgar and the Wordbearers. The Oculi Imperator acted as the eyes of the Emperor first and foremost, but there were 5 Custodes dispatched to the Wordbearers' primary expeditionary fleets for this task. As we know, these warriors could not defeat or even hope to keep the entire Wordbearers Legion in check, but it does leave us wondering if 5 Custodes were enough to kill Lorgar. While it is not a concrete answer, I think putting the minimum number of Custodes needed to kill any Primarch as low as 5 is a little too hopeful for our golden boys, but perhaps feasible against the less martially inclined Primarchs. 5 might very well be enough to take down Lorgar if they catch him off guard, but as we see in our next source, I would put him closer at like 8 to 10 for a proper, well-armed and semi-prepared fight. Another estimation we have actually comes from Guilliman himself in the novel Godblight. In this novel, Guilliman is joined by Tribune Colquhoun, 3 Alaris Terminators, 5 Wardens, and 10 regular Custodes. Guilliman muses how this number of almost 20 Custodes could conceivably beat him. Okay, so those are the 2 canonical sources we have of how many Custodes it would take to fight an actual Primarch. Anywhere from 5 Custodes on an unprepared Primarch to 20 Custodes on a well-prepared Primarch, but in the lower scale of martial prowess. And then, from my estimations and from what we have seen so far in the lore, 25 to 30 Custodes to take on any of the stronger Primarchs. I do want to quickly add though, the 50 Custodes sent to help the Emperor fight God Horus were kind of immediately overwhelmed. But I don't think counting God Horus as a normal Primarch is really fair for the purpose of this video. So enough about him. I am making a full video about God Horus and his fight with the Emperor very soon. You know what? Here is my scientifically proven how many Custodes does it take to kill a Primarch list, ranked by the amount of actual Custodes needed to, well, kill them. This skill is definitely not biased and not based on any preferences or preperceived ideas whatsoever. Also, yes, this list is based on pre-heresy combat fighting, and also assumes that there are Sisters of Silence nearby if the Primarch happens to be a Psyker, preparation and all that. Going from the least amount of Custodians needed to the most amount of Custodians needed. 0 to 5 Custodes, Alpharius and Omegon. 5 to 10 Custodes, Lorgar and Mortarion. 10 to 15 Custodes, Vulcan. 15 to 20 Custodes, Robute Guilliman, Magnus, Rogaldorn, Perturabo, and Ferrus Manus. 20 to 25 Custodes, Corvus Corax, Leman Russ, Angron, and Conrad Curse. 25 to 40 Custodes, Lion L. Johnson, Horus Lupercal, Sanguinius, Jagatai Khan, and Fulgrim. If Constantine Valdor is part of the group attacking said Primarch, he would count for about 4 Custodes. Of course, it is not very exact, and mostly my unfiltered opinion, but I hope it gives you a general idea of the differences between Primarchs and Custodes. And while yes, 5 Custodes could kill a Primarch, they most likely need a lot more to really make it happen with any form of certainty. But to end this video off, I wanna look at one last excerpt from Godblight, where even the Adeptus Custodes are confused about having to be the bodyguards of Robute Guilliman. Like, if it takes 20 of them to take him down, why does he need bodyguards in the first place? We're supposed to be guarding him, said Versilian. He had recently completed his 5th century of service and had taken the honor robes of the Wardens. He needs no guarding, Tribune. We are, I fear, entirely ancillary to purposes here. Guilliman cuts through the machines of the Death Guard as if they were paper stage props. We must watch him, growled the Tribune. He is not invulnerable, and you must watch your tone also, Versilian. Primarch he may be, but in him dwells the hopes of all of us, for the moment. I will not have him die under my protection, because we allowed ourselves to stumble into this ambush. Privately, he conceded that Versilian had a point. There was nothing to greet them in that chamber that could even slow the Primarch down. For all his suspicions of Guilliman's intentions, Colguan could not fault him as a warrior. The Adeptus Custodes records maintained that the Primarchs had been created primarily as weapons. Having seen Guilliman fight many times now, he judged the fact proven. Guilliman exhibited many other qualities in governance, administration, and law, but he was, ultimately, an unsheathed blade. All his other skills were adornments on the hilt. In the grim darkness of the far future, man-made horrors, nightmares, xenos, and technology so dangerous it can kill entire civilizations have been spread far among the stars. Many of these are weapons or experiments gone wrong. Some are even naturally occurring apex predators from over 10 dimensions. But in any case, the War in Heaven, Dark Age of Technology, and subsequent Age of Strife have left the galaxy filled with horrors that should never go free again. For humanity, the Age of Strife shattered our confidence. Everywhere man walked, there were challenges and threats. And for the first time in the existence of our species, human ingenuity failed to best these dangers. Humanity had its very psyche damaged by 1,000 years of catastrophe, mistrust of curiosity and invention, of alien influence and psychic witchcraft. Our fear became instinct. Humanity became close-minded and violently traditionalistic, desperate to avoid repetition of the pain they had experienced. And so, when the Emperor began his Great Crusade, billions eagerly walked into the light of the Imperium. Of course, countless warlords and isolationists resisted, but could you blame them for mistrusting everything that lurked among the stars? The God Emperor of mankind, in his infinite wisdom, knew the myriad threats of the galaxy had to be exterminated, and where this was not an option, they had to be contained and secured instead. While the Adeptus Astartes are his bulwark against terror, the task of locking away the galaxy's most terrible secrets was given to his custodians. Deep beneath the Imperial Palace, upon Holy Terra itself, reside the Dark Cells, a jail where every prisoner or dark relic could spell the end of the entire Imperium. They are watched and looked after by the Shadow Keepers, a dark shield host that has stood guard for over 10,000 years. These custodians are not like the others. They are not golden. They are no longer perfect. They are on edge, watchful of the dark, and after they leave their service, they rarely speak of what they witnessed. Now that the 13th Black Crusade has shattered Cadia and has torn the galaxy in half, the Shadowkeepers have tasted the bitter pill of failure. An unknown number of cells have been found empty, the occupants and relics within having disappeared during this Noctis Eterna. In a galaxy where chaos besets the Imperium on all sides, there now lurk even greater threats right underneath humanity's cradle. So when the Custodes partially lifted the edicts of restraint and vowed to increase their patrols past the Sol system, the Shadowkeepers decided to join them. These grim warriors carry with them the burden of having to complete their hunts or else face the doom of the entire Imperium. And in their hunts, the Shadowkeepers are utterly ruthless. Anyone who stands in their way for even just a moment is slaughtered. Perhaps one might even argue that, currently, the only true reason the Imperium still stands is not because of its endless armies, but because of the watchful eye of the Shadowkeepers. But with that dramatic intro out of the way, what exactly do we know about the Dark Cells? What do they look like? How do they work? What do the Shadowkeepers actually do in them? Let's take a look at the Dark Cells themselves before we get into the monsters that are held within. The exact origins of the Dark Cells are unknown, but we know for certain that they were created by the Emperor and completed after Terra was unified. But what is it like to be here? What is it like to be within the Dark Cell complex? Well, the Dark Cells are something by themselves, almost as unknowable as the prisoners they keep, to the point that only a custodian could ever hope to understand them. But luckily for us, as seen in Cypher Lord of the Fallen, we get to see Shadowkeeper Warden Hecaron's thoughts on them. Hecaron walks past the outer doors to cells and oubliettes, some only he can see. Others bulge with locks and buzz with field generators. Behind these doors are things that the custodians cannot or will not destroy. There is an old man whose words can kill billions. There is a coiling darkness that has no shape until it is seen. There is a small, black cube without hinge or lid, and on. Locked and sealed from memory and sight, there are things from the depths of time and darkest reaches of the human soul. Some have names in the language of old myths: the Eater of Gods, the Serpent of Ending, the Unmaker of Thrones. Some have never been named and never shall be. There are living things and machines and objects that sit silent and unmoving, and all are awake. How do I know this? You don't become a mystery without learning a few secrets. Summarize warp stability and interface, commands Hecaron.
Etheric sensors indicate widespread fluctuation in warp currents. Source external to complex. Null generators and etheric dampers compensating. Arcana wards and etheric seal integrity estimated at 98%.
End Vox system interface. Hecaron reaches a turn in the stone passage and pauses. He is counting, silently. Each fraction of a second, sliced off from the future with total precision. The Dark Cells are not a set of chambers, you see. They are a maze, forever remaking itself, filled with cutouts and kill systems. Sometimes, the Shadow Wardens let one of the lesser prisoners out to assess the systems. The result is never freedom. Hecaron and his kind hold the totality of the maze in their minds. They move through it by synchronizing with every twist, turn and alteration. If you could doubt that they were no longer human, this feat should put the matter beyond doubt. Hecaron reaches his count and steps forward. The passage behind reconfigures. Where there was air, there is now blank stone. His next step is upon the wall as embedded graph generators change which way is up. The passage ahead spins. Traps and hidden weapon clusters fire at random and rearm. Hecaron keeps walking, untouched and unimpeded, meshing into the lethal mechanisms. There are few Warden custodians in the cells tonight. Most have answered the call to stand in battle outside the walls. Hecaron has remained to stand watch over the incarcerated. He is alone, and even though he is a creature of near perfect control, perhaps a part of him can't help but wonder if something is about to happen. There have been incidents before, no prison is perfect, and tonight the inmates and prisoners are resistive. Hecaron can feel them stir, even through the energy fields, void logs, metal and stone. He can feel them. All of them are quiet, and Hecaron walks on, spear in hand, silence following at his side. The dark cells, as can be expected, also have a supremely dark aura around them. Sounds become whispers, and each hallway is filled with soft voices that echo into your ear. Shadows move on the walls by themselves. Even light becomes hard to use and reaches only a couple of feet as the Custodes are forced to use sodium braziers. Other than the Shadow Keepers, only the trusted augurs of the Psychana Ordo Auxilia and select members of the Mechanicus are permitted inside, while the Grey Knights and various ordos of the Inquisition do help with capturing prisoners and items which only the dark cells can contain. They hand them over to the Shadow Keepers on the surface of Terra without a word, and are usually asked to leave immediately. The dark cells also have layers to them, stronger cells for greater threats, deeper cells for the most dangerous things. While Cypher was kept there with his Fallen, their cells were indestructible, but nowhere near as advanced as some of the others. But if the dark cells have all of these defenses, protective wards, and even psychic dampeners installed, how did they fail when the Great Rift opened? Even during an event known as the Years of Madness, where all sorts of calamity befell Terra, from Genestealer cult uprisings to the death of the Captain General, how did the dark cells not break? Well, this is because of a rather long list of unfortunate accidents. The first is Abaddon breaking Cadia, which flooded Terra with demons and even extinguished the Astronomicon for a moment. The second is that while all of this was happening, a group of Dark Angels were trying to break into the Dark Cells, hunting Cypher. Yet for both of these things, the Dark Cells had contingencies. The Dark Angels destroyed a power generator for which there was a backup, yet a switch which was supposed to send a pulse of electricity to activate these backup generators somehow failed. Ultimately, this one switch ruined everything. Null fields and psychic dampeners all failed because of a lack of power. Worse yet, the man who made this switch died while making it, meaning that the person who replaced him must have skipped a step or not seen a flaw in it. A tiny mistake from millennia ago, biting the Shadow Keepers in the black armored buttplate. If you have seen my video about how Custodes are made, then you know that there are entire clans of people dedicated to making their weapons and armor, and it is not out of this realm to think that the same can be said for the Dark Cells. So imagine that your grandpa passes away on the job. You've been blessed by finishing his job, but 3 centuries later, it all blows up and almost destroys the Imperium because you forgot to put a screw in. There was also one final mistake, during which the Dark Cells were vulnerable, namely the fact that the Shadow Keepers were not present for the first time in 10 millennia. When demons invaded Terra, all of the wardens present left the cells to go fight on the surface. Only those who were required to fulfill the most important tasks stayed behind. Imagine the 300 companions staying inside the throne room, but then for the dark cells. As the world trembled and the cells broke one by one, the remaining Shadowkeepers killed many of the entities that had managed to escape. But as the brutalized nightmares of Old Night started to overpower the last remaining Guardians, the commander of the Shadowkeepers on the surface finally sounded his retreat. They had to go back. They had to save the Imperium. The surface had to defend itself. While on the subject of Shadowkeepers, they are the most important part of the Dark Cells, besides the cells themselves. They are the guardians of the Emperor's secrets. So let's take a quick look at these Dark Warriors. Many millennia ago, the Shadowkeepers numbered roughly 100 warriors, but since the opening of the Great Rift, the shield captain of this shield host has increased their numbers by many more. While not a requirement, many of the Shadowkeepers are also wardens. Each custodian warden is a veteran of at least 500 years of service. A warrior tempered and tested even by the standards of the Custodes. The Shadowkeepers, of course, also take on the duty of capturing relics and individuals who need to be contained, something they have found themselves doing more than ever in recent years. To do this, they use what is called a stasis oubliette, which looks like an unassuming rune-inscribed piece of technology. Yet this item traps its victims in a stasis prison with which to bring them to the dark cells in a fully safe manner, essentially a custodian-made Pokeball. For weapons and armor, the Shadowkeepers stay true to the rest of the Adeptus Custodes, with a couple of minor exceptions. Several Shadowkeepers are entrusted with ancient and mysterious weapons, generally banned for use within the wider Imperium, only ever used as a last resort if the Dark Cells fail. The Shadowkeeper shield host wear armor whose auromite has been tinted a velvet black to blend with the darkness of the corridors and cells they guard. It is offset by crimson that represents the blood of their sacrifices in this dark duty's name. One of the relics used by the Shadowkeepers is the Veiled Blade, an ancient blade that burns with a bitterly cold and dark energy. The Veiled Blade is bestowed upon a custodian who has vowed to recover that which should remain hidden from humanity and return it to the Dark Cells. As stated earlier, the Shadowkeepers are not the type to sit around and do nothing. For example, they have destroyed a space hulk named the Ominous Gift, an act that left even the Imperial Navy surprised at their personal intervention. The Shadowkeepers also in recent history have joined Captain General Trajan Valoris on a secret mission to the ruined remains of Cadia. The Captain General was recently even joined by the current commander of the Shadowkeepers, Borsa Tusk. As Shield Captain, Tusk holds the unique title of Lockwarden, and he has taken the failing of the Dark Cells rather personally. Before this happened, Tusk only left Terra twice, but now he has vowed to remain Lockwarden until all which has escaped is returned. Of course, to become a Shadowkeeper is both an honor and a terrible curse. It not only requires superhuman resolve and the strongest will in the entire galaxy, but also a couple of incredibly dark secrets and the will to hunt them. Let's take a look at the deeds of legend of Arian Porphyrius, as seen in the Adeptus Custodes 9th edition Codex. I write now of Arian Vespasian Macrina Porphyrius. His full list of deeds runs as long as his guardian spear, the weapon named Precious. But it is of his time with us, the Shadowkeepers, that I now put Memoquill to Nanovellum in memory of. Gone he is, in his final deed, hope of his return nil. But what of the beginning, when his armor first underwent the Aurum Molech tinting, when he first adopted our Sable. Each day for 1,000 days did he petition the Lockwarden to join us. He spoke of victories, of blood games, but he also spoke of patience, of resolve in the face of hardships, of the lessons learned from the witnessing of those beings and artifacts so evil their freedom cannot be tolerated. This did catch the Lockwarden's ear. The trials he passed. He stared into the 9 eyes of the Soul Delver for a day and a night and did not blink. He bested the 8 of the skull, while armed not with the spear, nor clad in a plate. For a day did he listen to the grantor of all 6 wishes before walking away unmoved. He breathed the fumes of the 7-fold trimiasma for 3 hours and did not seek relief. In dozens more tests was he successful. For 93 years did he serve well, a keeper of patience and vigilance whom many admired. Only once before these dark days did he leave the vaults, and return he did with the sorrow of Caracalla bound in warded chains. It resides with us still, never again shall it haunt the stars. In the maelstrom, in that place most foul was he lost, pursuing those secrets taken, when the light failed and the lion's gate drowned in blood. The chalice of Darkabaluster he sought, in the clutches of Huron's monsters it was. Never did he give up. Into the heart of the maledictum they plunged in escape, he with them. So yeah, the Shadowkeepers are some of the most insane prisoner guards you could possibly think of. They are the best of the best, but even these guys are changed and slowly broken down when near the prisoners of the dark cells. Alright, enough teasing, let's get into it. What is inside the dark cells? What does the Imperium keep down there? In the excerpts we have already covered, there are some teases, but a lot of the codexes give us lists like the following. The Old Man whose word can kill billions, the Black Cube without a hinge or a lid, and the Eater of Gods. There is also the Slithering Dreamer, which was killed on Tarnus 4 by one of the Shadowkeepers apparently. But we gotta have more than that. What other monsters, relics and entities do we know about? Well, a good example is when the Imperial Fist helped defend Terra during the Indomitus Crusade. Dark Cell relics were brought to the surface and used to repair the Phalanx. Technology and relics can be found in abundance in the Dark Cells, such as the Lament of Unreason, the Black Periapt of Ray 10 Eel, and the hideous Triblight Amulet, which are all kept under physically charged lock and key, behind meter-thick slabs of gene-sealed adamantine that are covered in runic wards. There are also many Xenos artifacts, remains of civilizations that went extinct millions of years ago. But back to entities. What kind of creatures are down there? Let's take a look at Cypher Lord of the Fallen, when Warden Hecaron fights one of the escaped prisoners. Hecaron is running, light screams around him, the passage into the Dark Cells complex trembles beneath his feet, gravity changes direction, the walls to his right become the floor, he switches step and balance without pause. The remains of a door lies across its path. It was a disc of cold iron and adamantium, half a yard thick and closed by bolts that ran 3 feet into the walls. Its wreckage clings to the passage walls, metal peeled and smeared into stone. He can see a shadow moving beyond the broken door, looming against the flame light. The Guardian Spear in his hand ignites with a shriek of lightning. Its blade is a smooth arc of metal, etched down to the atom, with the secret names spoken in its forging. The rounds loaded into the gun, worked into its shaft are silver. Gravity flicks up the ceiling as he leaps through the ruined door. The shadow turns to meet him. It does not have a name that a human mouth can speak. It does not have a shape, but it steals one from Hecaron's mind as he sees it. Empty darkness becomes a skin of molten iron, eyes of blue fire open in a face of bone, machine arms spread wide, claws rake sparks from the walls. Hackeron feels the fluctuating gravity flick out of being as the thing reaches for him. It is not fast. In a sense, it has not moved at all. It is just not where it was before. And where it is now is with its claws around Hackeron's neck. Hackeron's armor screams as it begins to buckle. He kicks off the wall as it becomes the floor, twisting free. Lightning-wreathed spear blade meets burning iron. Light and dark reverse, the nameless thing recoils, its form boiling into a red cloud. Hackeron lands, and the spear is already coming up, already lunging as the thing takes another shape. It is huge now, a roiling mass of splintered stone and black eyes. Hackeron's blade punches through it, but it is splitting, dividing like smoke caught in a gust of wind. It blasts towards Hackeron, wrapping around him, slicing, puncturing. The black and gold of his armor shrieks as razor edges score its surface. Hackeron feels the promise of annihilation and the hunger for freedom in the thing's touch. It is agony, but he makes no sound. For a moment he is falling back through the memories of his life, all the way back to before he could walk, when his only words to the world were an infant's cry, as he was taken from the flames of his home. He lets the moment and the sensation pass. Then he shrugs. Muscle and armor ripple in perfect harmony. The thing explodes from Hackeron in a cloud of glass shards. Hackeron's spear arcs through it. Matter is unmade. Lightning leaps through the thing as it fights to take a new shape. Hackeron cuts and pulls a device from his belt. It is small, an icosahedron in black matter. The thing knows what it is, knows what it means. It roars and flies at Hackeron one last time. He throws the black device. It unfolds through the mansion as it arcs to meet the creature. Light shears, distances expand so that the passage seems to extend to infinity. Then everything collapses inwards, and the creature folds and vanishes into nothing. The black icosahedron falls to the passage floor. Hackeron is already running again as he scoops it up and plunges down into the broken maze of the dark cells. While Hackeron was able to defeat the nameless entity he fought, he still needed to use a stasis prison to contain it, so he probably didn't actually kill it. This means that maybe, if the fight had continued for longer, Hackeron could have died. A rather horrifying thought, a being so powerful it can fight a Custodes one-on-one, and the Custodes needs to pull out a cheat to actually win. No wonder the Lock Warden has increased the number of Shadowkeepers. One of the other creatures we keep seeing mentioned in every Custodes codex is It That Craves. Now, I am going to theorize here, as we have literally nothing but a name. But It That Craves sounds a bit Slaanesh-like. She who thirsts, it that craves. But I am going to throw a curveball at you. What if It That Craves is not a demon, but instead an Eldar who helped create Slaanesh? After all, while Chaos Eldar are super rare, they do exist within the Eye of Terror. I mean, it's right here on the official novel cover for Atlas Infernal. There's also a being known only as one of the Fel. Who or what are the Fel? And why does Games Workshop refuse to give us normal creature names? My researcher and I both spent over a week grinding through the Liber Xenologies, every single edition rulebook, the Visions of Heresy books, and even tried to grind through some of the White Dwarfs. But we never found any reference to anything in 40k to what a Fel might be. So this is just my personal guess, and in a way an estimation from how other Xenos are usually described. But I believe that one of the Fel is a leftover Rangda. The Rangda are the single worst enemy the Imperium has ever faced, as it took 3 wars and multiple Space Marine legions to fight what is now known as the Rangdan Xenocides. If you want to learn more about the Rangda, then I suggest you watch my video about the Lost Primarchs. Link will be in the description below, but TLDR, there is in-lore proof that one of the Lost Legions was, well, lost during the Xenocides. But don't you worry, we have many more prisoners to discuss. Some of you might know that I am a massive Dark Angels fan, besides my deep love for the World Eaters, and so I have to talk about Cypher while he was in the Dark Cells. How did Cypher even get thrown into the Dark Cells? Isn't it like his whole thing that he is impossible to capture, and even more impossible to keep in a prison? Well, back when Guilliman was resurrected, Cypher helped him escape the Red Corsairs and wanted to join him on his journey to Terra. Yet when they arrived, Guilliman ordered Cypher to be arrested along with the Fallen who had joined him. So Cypher and his brothers found themselves in the Dark Cells, stripped of all their weapons and armor. But with the aforementioned Dark Angels hunting Cypher, which led to the Dark Cells being breached by blowing up a power generator, Cypher and the Fallen managed to escape. Besides Cypher, there is also the infamous Subject 11. There is a very straightforward answer to this one. Namely that this is the 11th Primarch. But is it really? All we have is a name. We don't know where they came from, when they were captured, or if they could even escape. The only thing we know is that this individual is powerful enough to threaten the entire Imperium. And well, can that truly be a single Primarch? For all of the might of a Primarch, they are formidable warriors and great generals, but they can be beaten, even outsmarted by their lessers in exceptional cases. Looking at you, Pollux. So I would argue Subject 11 is not a Primarch, or at least not a normal Primarch. After all, if the Primarchs were capable of destroying the Imperium by themselves, the Custodes would have made an active effort to capture or kill them when the Horus Heresy started. But what if it is, let's say, the 11th version of a test? Like how there was a test Primarch before the 20 Primarch sons of the Emperor were made with the fire he stole from the Chaos Gods, as we got to see in Era of Ruin. I'm talking of course about the Angel of Destruction. For those who don't know, this being is the single most powerful creation the Emperor has ever made. While not originally called a Primarch, he was easily more powerful than all 20 other Primarchs combined, something which the Emperor regretted. See, the Angel of Destruction is called that for a good reason. The Angel was a weapon to fight and utterly destroy Chaos. Yet it also concluded that to truly destroy Chaos once and for all, every single human had to be killed. So in a panic, the Emperor sealed him away and started over. But what is also important to know is that while the Emperor sent the Angel to Terra to be destroyed, after he had trapped it, the coffin somehow got lost. And of course, there is an entire story about the Inquisition finding it, using it, regretting it, and immediately locking it up again. So perhaps the Angel could be Subject 11. Or perhaps Subject 11 is another failed attempt by the Emperor at creating another super weapon. One of the scariest facts about the Dark Cells is that some cells remain corrupted with the dark essence of what was once in them. The issue is, if you find this dark essence, it means someone escaped. And as seen in Auric Gods, it can even make Shadowkeeper custodians collapse on the spot. Varrogalan strode on, ignoring the wailing, the whispered promises and sanity-eroding imprecations. The light maintained a constant struggle against the dark down here, the sodium braziers flickering weakly and barely holding back the encroaching shadow. Mechanicus adepts, the great Martian minds, had tried to engineer lumens capable of cutting through the darkness, but no power augment or fuel source could touch it. Even arcane methods of illumination had been found wanting. Though they did fare better than any technological solution, the darkness reigned, its dominion almost absolute. Varrogalan kept his eyes open, disavowing the half-glimpsed phantasms of the edge of sight. His nerves felt exposed, raw, as if the slightest touch would send them into spasm. Here, even the custodians gave pause. Marshalling his resolve, Varro Gallant came up to the chamber he sought. Much like the others, the chamber had a marking on the wall next to it, a simple numeric code that belied the nature of what it harbored. Its door stood open, a reminder of his failure. The gloom inside beckoned, but he refused it. Even in absence, the thing that had once been held here had a presence. Like an unquiet spirit, it almost seemed to haunt the room, which was scarcely 10 feet across and the same deep. The ceiling was high enough to admit the custodian, should he choose to enter. He did not. A void held him back, a space both unoccupied and occupied at the same time. Poised at the threshold, Varro Gallant lowered vigilance and pointed the guardian spear's side-like blade towards the dingy cell, as if he could impale the memory of what it had contained. He closed his eyes and was assailed by visions. A great leviathan, slowly uncoiling from a heady broom, its malice suffocating. A skeletal effigy, its horns reaching into the night, and the screams of sacrifices heavy on blood-misted air. A cage of lightning, a cruciform figure silhouetting it, the fork staring slits in reality. When he opened his eyes again, he had fallen to one knee. His heart pounded, breath sawed through his mouth. Varro Gallant gripped a haft of vigilance and used it to push himself back up. It anchored him for long enough that he threw off the insidious darkness. Then he turned, his back to the opening, and slammed the spear's ferrule against the floor. It made no sound beyond a deadened thud. The shame weighed heavily, but he bore the burden, as they all did. The open door behind him served as a reminder of their collective failing. It was not the only one. Other Shadowkeepers stood before similar doorways. The black iron halls ran deep, bored into Terra's bedrock, and sealed during the time of unity. There they remained, the vigil of the Shadowkeepers undisturbed, until the day the Neverborn returned to the throne world. But I'm not done just yet. Did you know that before the Dark Cells, Terra already had multiple subterranean prisons that could hold the likes of the Primarchs? One of them was even intended for the corrupted Horus. Let's get into the Kangba Marwu, the secret prison of Terra. The Dark Cells were indeed not the only prison the Emperor had built upon Terra, but it is his strongest to this day. On each side of the planet, there are the polar prisons, constructed underneath the deepest part of Terra's dried out oceans. The God Emperor was no stranger to needing cells for his most dangerous of enemies. But before the Dark Cells were conceived and the polar prisons were not secure enough, he had designed a special third prison complex called the Kangba Marwu. The Marwu is also known as the Vault, and much like the Dark Cells later on, they were guarded by the Custodians. This prison was initially built in the Himalaya mountains, but no one truly knows the origins of them, only that it has been there forever, and that even before the Unification Wars, it had cells for psychers and techno-monsters. If it were up to the Emperor, all of the greatest techno-barbarian warlords who defied him would have rotted away in the vault, such as Cardinal Tang or the Last Ethnarch, who was the very last nation resisting the Emperor with their Tempest galleries. Perhaps the greatest criminal who would have been put inside the vault was Narton Doom, who ruled over the Pan-Pacific Empire, but Valdor argued with the Emperor that it was better for Doom to be executed rather than to be contained. Of course, the vault was not made redundant after the Dark Cells were created. For example, those from the traitor legions who were part of the Crusader host on Terra were imprisoned here, and a cell was supposedly prepared for Horus. But like Doom, he would never set foot inside the vault. While one man has claimed to escape the vault, this man is also suspected of being a blatant liar. Of course, several Space Marines from the Crusader host did manage to escape the vault, making it all the more understandable why the Custodes chose to keep Cypher in the Dark Cells instead of the Kangba Marwu. So, in conclusion, the Dark Cells have worked so well that we don't actually have a lot of lore about them. The fact that they were compromised in part by the Dark Angels hunting Cypher is also just hilarious. Perhaps now is better than ever to mention that most of the Custodes lore we have is rather new compared to the lore we have of the Primarchs, Space Marines and Mosinnos factions. Most of it, if not all, came from the 7th edition onwards. In all honesty, I feel like the Dark Cells have a really solid lore foundation. It is a tool for Games Workshop to use and abuse to write really engaging and terrifying stories. I could see them use these cells more often, to explain the randomly escaped monster, or to give someone or something a proper way to be taken out of the lore once they are captured. Perhaps it is intentional that many of the things in the Dark Cells are only known by a name and not much else. I think there is a great amount of potential for theories and speculation, especially with It That Craves, One of the Fell, and Subject 11. And GW here has a lot of space to just keep writing forever, and as someone who used to enjoy the lore of SCP for a good couple of years, this stuff hits just right. It is said that the Custodes are the Emperor's greatest creation, that when the Master of Mankind began his grand plan to pull humanity out of old night and birth the fledgling Imperium, these were the first warriors who stood by his side. They were his golden bodyguards, creations of true purpose and an unshakable fate. Those who stood by his side at every battle acted as his heralds and portrayed themselves as his emissaries. Their skill and strength are without equal, yet their greatest duty was to protect the physical body of the Emperor, no matter the cost. As his bodyguards, the Custodians have perfected the trait of security for possibly over 12,000 years. Not a single soul enters the Imperial Palace without their knowledge. And since the fall of the Emperor, it is the 10,000 who have stood vigil every single day. 300 dedicated companions remain within the throne room and guard its every threshold at every moment. An entire shield host is dedicated to protect the Sol system itself, and another entire host defends the Emperor's most dangerous weapons and enemies within the Dark Cells below the Imperial Palace. Yet for all the greatness of the Custodes, for all their martial might, they still failed in protecting the Master of Mankind, beloved by all, from the threat that was Horus Lupercal. But what could the Custodes have done against Horus, a Primarch who transcended into a literal god? At the Emperor's command, the Custodes laid waste to all of his enemies, both mortal and immortal. When he needed the impossible done to hold back the greatest army to ever beset humanity, did the Emperor turn to his Primarchs or Angels of Death? No, as Diocletian notes, he turned to his private army, his talents. And the duty of the talents of the Emperor goes far beyond the protection of his body. But to face Horus Lupercal, favored son, war master and arch-traitor, was something no mortal or demigod could ever survive. The immortal Alanius Pius would be annihilated when facing down Horus Ascended. Even Sanguinius the Angel would die at his brother's hand. What were the Custodians to do against such a being? If it were up to the Emperor, nothing. Some joined him to help him reach the bridge, but he knew they did not have to be there during the duel. And in this, the Custodians' true strength shines. Not in their duty as guardians, or what they believed was right, but in the strength of their spirits and belief in the Emperor's true plan, which he refers to as the Golden Path. Horus did come close to breaking the Companions, but as Terra lay in shambles and the galaxy was burning, did only the Custodians truly stand firm, broken in heart but not in soul, and along with those few loyal Primarchs that remained at their father's side, they helped keep the Imperium alive for over 10,000 years. While the Imperial Guard, Sisters of Battle, Adeptus Astartes, and myriad other forces of the Imperium fight across 1,000,000 worlds against impossible odds, the Custodians have acted only when the threats against the Imperium were at their worst. From Constantine Valdor to Trajan Valoris, the Custodes have mourned the physical death of the Emperor, but they have kept his vision alive. They have kept his purpose alive. Especially now with the return of Robute Guilliman within the 42nd millennium, the Custodes walk the galaxy once more. They no longer lock themselves to Terra, the edicts of restraint have been lifted, and once again, citizens and nobles alike are awestruck by their sudden reappearance. But with this recent lore, the same problem as during the Horus Heresy has arisen. Robute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, current regent of the Imperium, has a squad of Custodes assigned to be his bodyguards. And once again, they cannot keep up with him. They cannot truly protect him. Is this another failure? Well, with that dramatic intro out of the way, let's take a look at the true purpose of the Custodians. Because, believe it or not, contrary to everything we just covered, the Custodes are guardians, but mainly are more scholars, protectors of culture, and reminders of the Emperor's true plan. Let's get into it. The Custodes are so much more than just custodians. They are a literal gathering of demigods. Back during the Unification Wars, their duties included being the noble emissaries, standing by their king as he asked the techno-barbarian warlords to surrender to his newly established rule. But the Custodes were also merciless executioners. Some of the greatest battles the Thunder Warriors fought were announced with the firing of a single Guardian spear into the air. Some Custodes, like Sagittarius, were so cruel that they would strike a prisoner for so much as daring to speak out against the master of mankind. And when his enemies were to be executed, Sagittarius would present their decapitated heads to a massive crowd in screaming victory. When the Emperor needed an enemy killed, whether it was in open war or through covert assassination, the Custodes proved to be his most reliable tool. When the war in the Webway began, because Magnus did something wrong at the onset of the Horus Heresy, the task of holding back the countless forces of the Chaos Gods was one shared by the Custodes, Sisters of Silence, Ordo Sinister, and only the most trusted elements of the Martian Mechanicum. With the 10,000 at their head, these forces bled for every inch and city conquered by chaos. Yet while all of this was happening, the likes of Rogel Dorn raged at this blatant favoritism. Why were the Imperial fists not unleashed within the Webway? Were the Sons of Dorn not good enough to meet the horrors of chaos with bolter and blade? Were the Custodes really the right choice? The answer is yes. Rogel Dorn is a master of the material realm, where his advanced mind can understand anything and everything. He is the certainty of stone made into a living being. The warp, on the other hand, is the very stuff of chaos. It is something so alien that the Praetorian of Terra would drive himself insane if he tried to master it like he did the material universe. So the task of fighting the greatest war humanity ever faced was given over to the soulless hunters of the Silent Sisterhood and the overwhelming power of the Ordo Sinister, being led by the Golden Guardians. As established before, the Custodes are unshakable in their loyalty on a genetic and even soul-based level. They guard the deepest secrets of the Imperium, and they know many of the Emperor's and Malcador's unspoken truths. Custodians excel at espionage, diplomacy, and the art of war, not because they were designed to be soldiers, but because the Emperor needed them to be his companions. The Master of Mankind never had an equal within this galaxy. He was far beyond even the capabilities of the Perpetuals. Hell, even Malcador struggled to keep up with his lightning-fast intellect and persistent stream of future visions, while the Primarchs could spar words with their father for a moment. The Custodians were ultimately the ones he turned to when he needed honest opinions. They may have been loyal, but they were not yes-men. They were critics, and through that, truly understood his visions and intentions. As this is really important when trying to understand why the Custodians did not fill in their duties, let's take a look at the Carrion Lord of the Imperium short story in Era of Ruin, when 300 Custodians disagreed with the Emperor on the idea of creating the Primarchs. In a way, they already saw what was coming. They balanced out the Emperor's inherent wish to rush. "Humans, the people," says Constantine, who is never first to speak and often the last. His face isn't bleached of emotion tonight. The masquerade has no place here. It's a performance for other audiences, nor is his voice the stern and stoic baritone of a being expecting his lessers to hear and obey. There's passion in his tone. He means what he's saying. "The people of the Imperium." This is an argument they've all heard before. Many of them agree with it. Aemon nods in the wake of Valder's words. When any of the 10,000 speak, the Emperor always deigns to hear their words. But the 300 are granted indulgences even beyond that. Rank and battle honors mean nothing. None of them has ever really known what qualities they possess that brought them into the Emperor's innermost circle. They know only that they are the chosen of the chosen. The 10,000 shall lead the armies of the Imperium into battle. The others speak too, all of them. Their protests and promises echo through the Grand Chamber, over a syncopated backbeat of machines drilling their way through the dimensional barrier. Diocletian listens to them all, though his eyes never leave his king. He feels strange being here with only his kindred in gold, though he doesn't know why. The truth is, he's not alone in this sensation. When every objection has been made and every alternate path suggested, the Custodians fall silent. The Emperor turns to the only one of the 300 that has not yet spoken. "Diocletian," he says, in a voice that his false sons will one day say is kind, unkind, angry and calm, no matter its pitch and tone. To Diocletian, he just sounds tired. Dio isn't sure what to say. He lacks Constantine's soulful composure, or Ammon's gift for abrupt rhetoric, or Ra's poetic sincerity. He worries, in his quiet moments, if he is worthy of inclusion within the 300. He wonders if his king made a mistake by appointing him. Everyone is watching him, waiting for him to speak, waiting for him to join the chorus of oaths, that their blades will be enough, that the Custodians will lead the armies of the Imperium into battle, and that those armies will be human, not legions or transhumans, not led by godling generals. That all this work, all these machines, are unnecessary. You don't need to do this, he could say. You don't need to steal the warp's essence. You don't need to create these things, these Primarchs. Diocletian tells the truth, as he always does to the Emperor, as they always all do. It's just that tonight, his truth is different to theirs. I don't think it matters what I say. Dio leans on his spear and inclines his head to the Emperor. I don't think it matters what any of us say. With respect, my king, I think you're going to do it anyway. Among the Custodes, there are a number of them who hold a unique relationship with the Emperor. Constantine Valdor is the Captain General. He is the closest companion and most trustworthy confidant anyone could ever ask for. Even when the Siege of Terra was at its height, Valdor was still hesitant to call Sanguinius and Dorn his brothers, but he did form some kind of love for them. Another custodian, like Ra and Dimian, was trusted with the secrets of the Emperor's early life, given visions of the rise and fall of many human empires, so that he would understand the importance of why Dracnian had to be shackled. Diocletian, however, was here for another reason. The Emperor and Diocletian shared a blunt honesty, and the Emperor appreciated that. As we have seen, Diocletian knew the Emperor would go on with his decision, no matter what the Custodes would say. But when the Webway project was utterly ruined, Diocletian asked what would happen next, and the Emperor told him that he did not know. Words that no custodian had ever heard before or after. When Diocletian suggested once they killed Horus, all that had been lost could be rebuilt, the master of mankind had his doubts, and bluntly told Diocletian that he did not think he would be there to see it. Which perfectly leads us into the death of the Emperor. Well, his physical death. His body broken. Let's take a look at how this actually happened, and if the custodians truly failed in their duty. The death of the Emperor is perhaps the greatest tragedy to have ever befallen mankind. I have covered the fight between Horus and the Emperor extensively in both my How Strong is the Emperor and How Strong is God Horus videos. Links will be in the description in case you wanna watch those videos after this one, as we go into quite a lot of detail. But it is time to look at this duel from the perspective of the Custodes. Operation Anabasis is described as a suicide mission from the very start. To Constantine Valdor, he does not care if the shields of the Vengeful Spirit were lowered by accident due to a power failure or because it was a trap. This one moment of weakness is the only chance the loyalists have at attacking Horus directly. So the greatest warriors who still stand on Terra gather. Rogel Dorn joined by his Huskarls, Sanguinius by his Sanguinary Guard, and the Emperor by his Heteron Guard. They teleport aboard the Vengeful Spirit, but what they encounter is so much worse than a trap. It is a conversion chamber to turn loyalist men into chaos-induced monsters. The Vengeful Spirit and most of the solar system are in the warp. Horus has created a living hell masquerading as a paradise. First, Horus turns the companions against their master, forcing their blades against him. Those who fall weep as they fight the King of Ages, who in turn mourns the loss of every custodian he has to now personally kill. Horus did not corrupt these Custodes, he completely unmade them and puppeted them for his own enjoyment. After this, the Emperor and his few surviving companions walk straight into another trap. Even the Emperor finds it hard to distinguish what is true and untrue. While he can find his focus, the same cannot be said for the Heteron. One by one, the Custodians die. Statues that mimic them in absolute perfection, killing them the moment anyone blinks. It feels like they are falling into heaven. But as Andalon suddenly sinks into a wall, the Emperor calls out. The Golden Group focuses up, and suddenly, they are in hell. The spirits that stalk the Dark Room attack. The Chaos Gods need every single Heteron vanquished. Each warrior is one of insane skill and unbreakable determination, and the ruinous powers cannot risk them standing by the King of Ages in his final battle against Horus Ascended. the master of mankind, found himself forced to protect those who were designed to protect him. The Chaos Gods sought to turn the last bastion of loyalty that remained against the Emperor, but instead he showed them why he is the King of Ages. The Chaos Gods were burned with their own power as the Emperor's bare hands gripped the warp and he blasted their own soul stuff back at them. Now, only 7 companions remain, all empowered by their master's indomitable will. Only one of these survivors, Cacaltus Dusk Heteron Proconsul, would stay by the Emperor's side until the very last moment, witnessing something no custodian was meant to see: the fall of his Emperor against the arch-traitor. The proconsul feels the Emperor's pain as if it were his own, and in a moment of near mental collapse, he does something unthinkable and shows us why the Chaos Gods needed all of the custodians dead, as seen in The End in the Death Volume 3. The Emperor cannot move. He is pinned by slow incinerating death. He refuses to scream or voice his pain. He will not give Horus that satisfaction, but he cannot move, except to writhe and spasm. He cannot move, but Cacaltus can. Fueled by pain and rage and desperation, the proconsul breaks from his trance and hurls himself at Horus. His bolter shells, blasting from the mount of his paragon spear, reach Horus first, detonating against the first found thigh and hip. The weapon's blade, swung in an expert address, strikes an instant later. Horus turns, surprised by the Heteron's assault. Cacaltus hacks and thrusts, driving his spear against the serpent's scales. Horus shifts his maul to smash his attacker aside. He continues to pour energy into his father's body. He has not finished. He will not be interrupted. Then Mourn It All bites. Leto comes at the first found from another angle, adding his borrowed blade to the proconsul's valiant efforts. Horus roars, his rage shakes the psychofractal darkness of the court. Still he burns power down into his father. Then Rubio's sword, star bright with the Emperor's will, slices into him too. Loken does not hesitate, his gauntlet still red with the angel's blood. He slashes the blade at his father's plate, every blow a killing blow, every blow a lethal strike, every blow, raining at the War Master from each one of the 3, would be a conquering blow from any other day. The stroke of a master warrior that would fell and slay any opponent. Except this opponent is past slaying. He is deathless and unkillable. The undivided power of chaos has inured him against mortal harm, and that which does not kill him simply makes him angry. Still the 3 blades land, a furious onslaught that cracks skills and scores plate. Horus turns to them and strikes at Loken first, but Leto knocks him aside and the proconsul willingly accepts the blow. Cacaltus moves, driving his spear blade against the talon to turn the blast aside. The arc of power goes wide. It scorches Loken and Leto as it passes over them and scalds their flesh inside their plate. It blasts a deep and molten trench in the floor of the court. The infinite architecture of the War Master's sanctum shivers and shifts to repair its sepulchre black form. Horus thrusts forwards. Cacaltus strikes him again from the right. The War Master smashes him aside without a second look, intent upon his son. The proconsul tumbles away, a discarded toy, Presidium shield shattered, and the Quillen plate torn. Loken gets to his feet as Leto finds his. He turns to face his father. The War Master is an onrushing avalanche of darkness. The claws rise, power wells to roast his son to cinders. The baleful lightning arcs out and envelops Loken and Leto both. They do not die, they stand, bemused, as the hate and power, black as old night and threaded with warp flux, crackles around them with absolute vehemence, yet held at bay. Horus lowers his hand and the lightning stops. He turns. The Emperor lowers his hand, dissolving the mind shield that prevented the immolation of his 2 warriors. He is standing. His golden breastplate is scorched black and his cloak is charred. Blood runs down from his nose and the corner of his lip. His war sword rises in his hand, and an asterism of white light flares like a rising sun behind his crowned head. He moves toward his son with the lustral rod of a supernova. Although Litu and Loken both stand with the proconsul, he was the first to move. He was the first to wound Horus. Together, they bought the Emperor a moment to recover, to gather his strength and continue fighting Horus. What is utterly insane, however, is the fact that the Aquilon Terminator armor stopped Horus's lightning. It cracked the breastplate and tore apart the shield. But the proconsul was only mortally wounded when he was struck by Worldbreaker right after. This is the same power Horus used to almost insta-kill the Emperor during the opening of their fight. This custodian essentially held off a goddamn chaos-empowered Kamehameha. As Horus and the Emperor collide once again, there is so much force unleashed that it sends the 3 remaining warriors flying. The proconsul, even in death, has decided he will keep serving. Cucultus gets back up. He has given his life once already for his King of Ages. He will give it again. Spear in hand, he approaches an impossible storm of rod and blades. Cucultus is a heteron. He will not watch. He will not look away. He will fight and die 1,000 times if that is what it takes. As Horus beats the Emperor again and again, and once more prepares the perfect murder stroke, Cucultus stands back up. The proconsul declares that by his will alone does the Imperium defy Horus. Courage is Cucultus' only weapon. The defiance of this single heteron guard is enough to make Horus pause. Horus sighs and slowly turns to the custodian. From the red eye on his chest, he fires a beam of searing bloodlight. The custodian trembles, his spear slowly falling. Horus gets angrier, and only once he recites all 620 names of the proconsul does the warrior finally truly die. The combination of sigillite magic and imbued willpower has protected him far longer than it should have. But once again, the custodian has bought time for his king. The Emperor has time to rise again. Of course, we know the outcome. The Emperor destroys Horus's soul, as shown in Era of Ruin, and then the Emperor collapses, a sliver away from true death. He uses the tarot cards to send his last message, to communicate that he has to be put upon the golden throne to survive his injuries, and become the Carrion Lord of the Imperium. But how did the Adeptus Custodes react to the death of the Emperor? Neither Valdor nor Diocletian were there to witness his death, but they both, alongside the surviving Custodes, mourned, grieved, and changed forever. Out of the remaining couple thousand, it was only Valdor who refused to give up right after the heresy. He spent months away in his personal chamber to contemplate what to do next. He spoke to Russ and put the Primarch's pain to rest, reminding him that many more sagas had to be told. Through this, Valdor seems to have found his own purpose, and maybe Russ has as well, possibly giving us an answer to why both have disappeared for over 10 millennia. But I'm getting off topic. Valdor was the first to realize his meaning in this new Imperium, but for the other Custodes, it took many centuries to realize their new and true purpose. In the meantime, they mourned. They stored away their armor, wore only a black helmet and robes of mourning, and only did the basic duties demanded of them. Some custodians became bitter, others became angry, but some became more human, as if trying to recreate what the Emperor would have done for them, as seen in Era of Ruin. A beggar child bars his path, gazing up at him with amazed eyes. Diocletian remembers a time, long ago by his measurement of things, and practically prehistorical to the pilgrims and beggars surrounding him, when he'd been here with Zephan, the bringer of sorrow, and another child stood before them in a similar way. So much time has passed since then, so much has changed. Are you the god emperor? The child asks. Past and present collide. Diocletian's throat closes. He goes down to one knee, still towering above the youth. He can see the gold of his warplate reflecting in the child's eyes. No, Diocletian tells the boy. My name is Dio, but I know the emperor. He unbuckles his scarlet cloak, marked with the Palatine Aquila, the emperor's own symbol. He bundles it up and hands it to the filthy child, who takes it in trembling hands. Perhaps it will serve this boy as a blanket for the rest of a long life. Perhaps the child will be killed by jealous relic hunters. Diocletian knows which is more likely in this new dark age, but he hopes he's wrong to think it. Although the cynicism of Diocletian never left him, he has become willing to show kindness for the first time. Having lived through the Horus Heresy and the trauma of losing his leader has somehow made Diocletian more human. And perhaps it is through this that the custodians have managed to heal from the tragedy of the emperor's death. Dio also notes how empty the 10,000 feel without Ra, Valdor, and so many of the others. In the aftermath of the Siege of Terra, the Custodes are at their absolute lowest, but as time passes, they begin to rise once more, and the vision of the Emperor's golden path slowly begins to re-emerge. So yeah, the Custodians feel like they failed, but at the same time, this perceived failure has made them even better than what they were with their living emperor. In a way, the emperor's failure with Horus was the true mistake. Whatever the Custodians did, it would not have mattered. They had to keep his vision going. They had to be what he never could be, a leader to humanity. I would also love to share the Primarchs' opinions on this subject, but my researcher and I have searched extensively for sources on it. Unfortunately, it seems that Games Workshop has chosen to reserve this information for the upcoming Scouring Book series. Once those exciting new novels are released, I will create a video discussing what the Primarchs themselves thought about the loss of their father, as right now, we canonically have no clue. For now, let's move on to what a true failure for a custodian actually is, as this also properly shows that the custodians, indeed, did not actually fail their emperor, and have been doing a great job. Let's take a look at Valerian. Now, for those who are familiar with the custodian named Valerian, you will know that this guy is fully convinced that he is a failure, and he is usually brought up in arguments about this exact subject, as to why the Custodes failed in their one duty. For those who don't know who he was, Valerian was a shield captain, and it was believed the Emperor chose him to join the companions and stand vigil inside the throne room. This is the singular highest honor any custodian could receive, and while Valerian was eager to take up this duty, he failed in his trials. When the gates to the throne room opened, Valerian's body refused to obey and permit him entrance. Valerian took this failure in the worst way possible. He returned to his regular duties, yet his sleep was disturbed. Every time he blinked or even remembered the event, he felt undeserving of being a custodian. Valerian's view of the Adeptus Custodes changed. They were no longer worthy of being the Emperor's guardians. To him, the Custodes were an order of failure upon failure, a group of warriors who only knew glory during the creation of the Imperium and the dark days of the Horus Heresy. As Valerian reads Diocletian's book, The Master of Mankind, he hopes to find answers. It wasn't until another custodian, a dear friend named Navradoran, spoke to him until he changed his view, as seen in Watchers of the Throne, Emperor's Legion. It tells me that our service was not always like this. We were not always fighting with silence. Valerian turned a page of the 5,000-year-old copy of Master of Mankind. Navradoran nodded. And yet, even then, there was error. With greater excuse. Was there? We have become too used to regret, I think. We have become too used to thinking that the time before was so much greater than our own. And yet, you are reading Diocletian. You can see that even before the failure, there were doubts. When I think what has been lost, then you do not remember what has been gained. Navradoran placed a heavy gauntlet on the polished wood. They lived in a time of plenty, and we in a time of strife. Consider how much greater our fate must be compared to theirs. The words did not comfort Valerian, but he could not wholly disagree. I could not pass. I saw what lay within, and I could not pass. What does it mean? Take it as a sign you are unworthy, and you only harm yourself. We are so ready to believe that we are not good enough. Because once, 10,000 years ago, we were faced with an impossible task, and we performed better than any could have ever demanded. Do you know, there is some advantage to spending time outside this place? I have met men with no discernible talent who believe themselves kings. I have met the sick who think themselves healthy, the wicked who think themselves righteous. They are so weak, all of them, weak as chaff. Yet they do not torture themselves with our doubt. They live, they squabble, they laugh, they blaspheme, and I have come to think that this, somehow, is the greatest sense of all. Valerian could not help but smile. You will go back out there, then. I find it invigorating, more so than these places. Valerian disagreed. He found a library to bring him great peace against the ever-shifting outside universe. Go in his will then. As you, brother. Valerian and Navradoran clasped hands. And do not read too much. Valerian and Navradoran offer us two different insights into the Custodes. Valerian sees the failure, the tragedy, and still lives in the shadow of the Emperor's death. Navradoran sees the greatest chance ever, the true power held within the Custodes. Valdor, Diocletian, and the 10,000 of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy fought during an age when the Imperium was at its strongest. Half of the Legiones Astartes turned traitor, but the other half remained loyal. The Imperial army fought with untold trillions of soldiers. The Martian Mechanicum had its own schism, but hundreds of Titan legios stood by the Emperor. When Horus came to Terra, he faced a mere 1,000 Custodes, but with them stood the Blood Angels, Imperial Fists and White Scars. While 3 legions could never beat 9, time was running out for Horus. Robute Guilliman was coming, and he had brought the entirety of the Segmentum Ultima to come and fight Horus. And what do the Custodes of the 41st millennium fight with? The Adeptus Mechanicus is a shadow of the glory of Mars. The Imperial Guard and Navy have become nothing more than cannon fodder, with the greatest of the old Imperial army lost to them. The Adeptus Astartes have become mutilated and brainwashed child soldiers, warriors fighting in accordance with a 10,000-year-old codex. And the Imperium has more enemies than ever before. The forces of chaos harass the Imperium at every opportunity. The Black Legion strikes out from the Eye of Terror, and the Red Corsairs have turned the Maelstrom into a nightmare. Orcs rampage across the galaxy unchecked. Tyranids consume worlds by the dozens, and the Necrons are reawakening. The Imperium is besieged on all sides. Its enemies within and without are legion. and the Custodes still serve with the same unshakable loyalty and determination as that of Constantine Valdor, Diocletian, and Ra Endymion. They are not failures, they are the heroes for holding on to that original glory. They are the living proof that the Imperium can be made into the Emperor's true vision. But what have the Custodes been doing in the last 10,000 years to fulfill this dream? Essentially, what have they been doing to make sure that their supposed failure did not turn into an actual failure? Although the Adeptus Custodes did not take part in the scouring after the Horus Heresy, they did continue to serve, albeit more secretly, and as mentioned before, in both black armor and robes for multiple centuries. During the War of the Beast, they struck down a force of Eldar Harlequins seeking entrance to the throne room. The Custodes ruthlessly put down any rebellion that dared to get out of hand upon the holy surface of Terra, such as the Siege of the Eternity Gate, where the Custodes obliterated the cult of the Hedonic Lord and slaughtered billions of Terran inhabitants. After a decade-long blood game, the Custodes also discovered a root which would later be used by a Dark Elder assassin known as the Blade of Patesh. The blade would be caught and killed by the Custodes when attempting to break in. But outside of Terra, what else have the Custodes been up to? Well, the Shadowkeepers destroyed the Space Hulk known as the Ominous Gift. Why and how remains a mystery to the wider Imperium, but the then Captain General Aesalt Kumadra and the High Lords of Terra had to overrule the objections of the Imperial Navy. On another occasion, the Aquilan shield arrived and prevented the execution of Cadian Lieutenant Natashan. With the Aquilan shield by his side, Natashan's unusual tactics and bodyguards saw him rise to the rank of Imperial Warmaster. As Warmaster, Natashan destroyed the Orkwag Daxkrag before it could ever reach Terra. Yet the Custodians never rescinded the execution order of Natashan. The Warmaster was executed for his crimes from many years past. Between the Shadowkeepers, Dreadhost, Aquilan Shield, and Emissaries Imperatus, the Custodes have remained active in the entire galaxy. Small squads to sometimes entire shield hosts deployed in the shadows, ensuring the Emperor's will was done throughout Imperial history. During the Eighth Black Crusade, the Emissaries Imperatus managed to negotiate a strike force of Adeptus Mechanicus, Minotaurs, and the Dreadhost to unite and destroy the traitor-captured strongholds in the Andromax system. The Custodes have prevented many dark plots from both the forces of chaos and those within the Imperium, such as when Shield Captain Tibinus Lancilius hunted down the High Lord Seneca and a group of Taurian Inquisitors who intended to starve the Emperor of the 1,000 psychers needed to sustain him. However, not every era for the Custodes has been as productive. Captain General Galahad was notoriously stagnant. This stagnancy would even spell the doom for Galahad's successor, Captain General Launcedre, who died after being betrayed by a subsect of Doomscryers. Only when Captain General Trajan Valoris rose to the occasion did the Custodes know of an era of proactiveness. Now that Robute Guilliman has returned, the Custodes set out into the galaxy with numbers never seen before. And all of this does not even begin to mention the role of the Eyes of the Emperor, who have created vast spy networks and fight counterinsurgencies against the greatest threats of mankind. The Eyes act in accordance with what they see fit, having retired from their duty as a custodian, but not in their oaths to the Emperor. Some present themselves as inquisitors, others as cult demagogues. Some even take the fight to their enemies directly, commanding planets or armies to defy those who dare to raise their weapons against the God Emperor of mankind. One group, known as the Eyes Unblinded, have even retained their golden armor and weapons, with which they outright hunt and exterminate traitors and Xenos alike. The Emperor created his Custodes to continue their duty even in death, and they have never failed their King of Ages. So let's combine all the information I have covered in this video into an easy to understand and cohesive answer. Let's take a look at whether the Custodes failed or succeeded in their duties. In their every duty, the Custodes have been tested. On occasion, they have tasted bitter defeat, but they have never been found wanting. The Custodes did not fail. They fulfilled their exact purpose, and even when it was the Emperor who failed himself, they stood by their King of Ages with zero doubts. The Custodes never liked the Primarchs or the Astartes, yet when called upon to fight beside them, they still do so. On rare occasions, the Custodes and Astartes have formed bonds of friendship and trust. The Imperium has stood upon the brink of destruction 1,000 times over, but through the combined efforts of humans, abhumans, Astartes and Custodes, has the Imperium survived for 10,000 years. The Age of Darkness is a long and dark chapter in the Imperium's history, a tragedy that could have been so much worse if the Custodians had truly failed in their duty. The defiance of Kekalta's dusk was one so fierce that it makes you wonder how the fight between Horus and the Emperor would have ended if there were more than one companion present. The Custodes have bled themselves dry in the name of the Emperor's vision, and they have never truly failed. The very gods of chaos recognized the threat present in the Heteron who joined the Anabasis operation. The 10,000 have more than earned their place besides the Emperor, come hell or high water. In every way imaginable, the Custodes did what the Emperor expected of them. They never questioned or doubted their master. As advisors, they spoke out against him, voiced their honest opinions, and when the Emperor disagreed with them, they still followed him. He is the master of mankind, beloved by all, but to the Custodes, he is their King of Ages. And now that the Imperium finds itself in the Era Indomitus, a time of great calamity, but also the first time in 10,000 years that mankind has any hope to cling to, the Custodes have stepped out from the shadows. Gone are the days of sudden decapitation strikes, the breaking of a threat not fully realized. Now is an era where the Custodes wage open war once again. During the dark days of the Horus Heresy, the 10,000 found themselves shackled to Terra, but no more. Terra remains threatened by the forces of chaos and the rampaging hordes of the Fourth Tyrannic War. But for as long as the Custodes continue their duty, the Imperium will stand. And for as long as the Custodes live, the Emperor's original vision has a chance of being fulfilled. The Custodes are the Emperor's personal bodyguard, acting as both his most noble emissaries and pitiless executioners. They were the Emperor's firstborn gene-crafted warriors, predating both the Thunder Warriors and Space Marines. The Custodes have become the symbol of the Emperor's wrath over more than 10,000 years of their service. To an ordinary man, they are warriors of near godlike proportion and skills. Even to the Thunder Warriors and Astartes, They are figures of legend, created from the dreaded lore of the Dark Age of technology, combined with the personal know-how of the Emperor's godlike genetics, and armed with the very best equipment and armor available within the entire Imperium. The Custodes know no equal, and only the Primarchs and the Emperor himself rise above them. It goes without saying that these bodyguards, with their absolute loyalty, have been assigned to protect the Emperor's person since the Unification Wars, and would later on protect the Master of Mankind's secrets, vaults, and what would become known as the Imperial Palace. To be a Custodes is to be one among 10,000 within the whole galaxy. As well, the Emperor and the Selenar Jinkos on Luna created the Space Marines into mighty legions, ranging into the millions. Over 2 million combined, actually. And the Guard grew into 3 trillion active soldiers. The Custodes are 1 in a quadrillion. 1 in many generations of the entire galaxy. Of course, with the Emperor's interment upon the Golden Throne, the Custodes have grown into something even more mythical for humanity. But after 10,000 years of watching, the time has finally come for them to stride into the galaxy with numbers not seen since the Horus Heresy, and woe upon those who oppose him on Terra. The Space Marines are known as the Emperor's Angels of Death for many reasons, and although some facets of the Custodes recruitment and creation are shared by the Adeptus Astartes, the two could not be any more different in personality and behavior. Both types of warriors inspire awe, and even impose what the Space Marines dub as superhuman dread, where a mortal cannot comprehend the size and speed of the Emperor's finest fighting right in front of their eyes, introducing a PTSD-like state. What a Space Marine is to a guardsman, a Custodes is to a Space Marine. To the most faithful and loyal servants of the Imperium, Custodes are literal gods worthy of worship. Some Custodes deeply care for those who serve the Emperor, are kind and show a level of humanity completely removed from the Space Marines, and even becoming friends with the monstrous Sisters of Silence for their shared goals. But others, just like the Astartes, take a distaste for those not worthy of ascension, seeing them as nothing more than cattle to be protected. For all their greatness, some of the Custodes truly have no charisma. Yet, when it comes to treason and betrayal, the Custodes are the most ruthless and cold force within the entire Imperium. They cut down Chaos Space Marines with utter disgust and silence. The terrifying ease with which Custodes slaughter Astartes can be compared to a feral dog released on the children's playground. Any resistance from mortal soldiers, even if they are some of the best unaugmented soldiers such as did the best of science, are turned into literal children as the Custodes wade through enemy fire, cutting their foes down with perfectly calculated thrusts. Yet, while they are capable of compassion, it does not mean Custodes show it often. When delivering Primarchs reinforcements to their new parent chapters, the Custodes were often formal, cold, and even outright hostile, more than once killing Astartes captains and chapter masters that dared oppose the Emperor's will for the Primarchs integration. Being shrouded in both an aura of fear and worship, when a single Custodes arrived before a rebelling crowd, it turned a massive riot into a peaceful surrender. The rioters folded in on themselves as people gave into terror and fled, while others sought penance for the heresies they committed and begged for mercy. While the Emperor denounced religion and being a god, the ecclesiarchy has become a controversial topic among the Custodes. As while they respect the likes of the Sisters of Battle for their loyalty and skill as a warrior, their faith and fanatism is something that grinds the gears of most Custodes, with some outright mocking their zealotry. If that was enough lore for you and you want to get to the juicy excerpts and the power scaling, you can skip to this number on the screen. It's just for those that want a deep dive and want all the information, this is for you. As the Imperium grew during the Great Crusade, it was initially thought that the Legio Custodes were a different and more advanced type of Space Marine Legion, but this could not be further from the truth. The first appearance of the Custodes begins back during the Unification Wars, where they started out first as a set of 4 Golden Guardians. Years later, the Emperor's Guard grew to an impressive 30 warriors, and 8 decades later, hundreds of Golden Giants fought at the Battle of Red Frost. Their origins within the Unification Wars, however, is not what sets apart the Custodes. For instance, they recruit exclusively infants, which during early Imperial history were taken from slain warlords and enemies of the Emperor. Others, such as Ra and Endymion, had different origins, such as being taken from his mother after her execution for stealing the last of Terra's water. Custodes also lacked the distinct addition of additional organs, augmatics or crude grafts. The decade-long process to create a single Custodes sees thousands of candidates die or be eliminated as the transformation develops. Practically, they are rebuilt from the ground up on the cellular and DNA level. It is even thought their souls are impacted by this process, possibly pointing towards the soul-binding process between the recruits and the God Emperor himself. The babies who survive to become full-fledged Custodes become a new person entirely and unrecognizable from their own families. When the Emperor still could, he was personally involved in each Custodes creation. His methods were so far beyond human comprehension, it was often seen as biomancy or alchemical sorcery. With their high mortality rate, yet insane prestige, there have been entire clans who have sent whole generations to the Emperor to join the Custodes. But with the evolving nature of Terra, in more recent times, Terra's nobility sends their youngest generations out in the hopes of supplying the right genetics. The Custodes are actually also famed for picking names dating back to Terra's ancient history, such as kings, gods, heroes or philosophers, in order to remind the galaxy of Terra's long history and nobility. On occasion, however, the Custodes are also known to pick candidates encountered during their missions if they meet the criteria only known to them and the Emperor himself. The one-man army each Custodes is turned into also has a rather dark and misfortunate origin within the dark age of technology. As the abominable technology ran rampant, gene crafting became widespread, especially on Terra itself. During Old Night, many scientist kins and techno-demagogues rose using abhorrent techniques to create abhuman and monsters. These gene-wrought monstrosities were left to fester and grew worse, resulting in the Emperor being forced to create the Thunder Warriors, essentially him fighting fire with fire. While the Thunder Warriors were exterminated primarily by the Custodes, and their survivors hunted down by the first Angels of Death who would become the Legiones Astartes, the Custodes remained highly distinct from the Space Marines, because they were not a military organization. Instead, the Custodes were a paramilitary. Their duty was not to win wars and conquer planets, but to enact the Emperor's will. And for this, they were created to dominate the battlefield. With the fall of the Emperor and the Horus Heresy ended, it would result in him being unable to oversee the creation of his newest guardians. This led to the task of creating the Custodes being handed over to a group of the best chirurgeons and bioalchemists on Terra within the Imperial household. This duty, however, even with the centuries of experience and knowledge, remains so far above the skill of normal humanity that even the scientists themselves are enhanced into something more than human within their gilded and hidden laboratories. Another element of their creation process is the insane amount of knowledge fed into their minds. The arts of death, deceit, destruction, and even assassination are of vital importance to their daily tasks. But each Custodes is also intended to fully understand politics, war, philosophy, history, art, and countless other subjects. An often overlooked role of the Custodes is to be the companions of the Emperor with whom he conversed and debated regularly. After the interment of the Emperor on the Golden Throne, the Custodes had also inherited the worst of all knowledge, and no secret was beyond them. Only Reboot Gilliman and the 10,000 can truly understand how far the Imperium has fallen, and just how butchered the Emperor's dream has become. This knowledge and the sheer quantity of it have even turned some amongst the potential recruits insane, right before they are brutally eliminated. Should a potential recruit be deficient in any quality, whether that be biology, psychology, loyalty, or obedience, they are discarded without remorse or hesitation. Absolutely no cost is spared when equipping each Custodian. Their weapons are handcrafted masterworks forged by hereditary artisans and hidden away in subcults of the Martian Mechanicum present on Mars. Even these artisans are gene-forged to possess dexterity and patience beyond any human man, so that they may never fail in their duties of creating the perfect weapons. The Custodes also post the Magisterium Lex Ultima, an edict which means that the Custodes obey only their internal organization and the Emperor himself, and that the wider Imperium is subservient to the Custodes at all time. This has led the Custodes to rarely possess their own ships, such as the Falchion-class battleship, but instead commandeer an Imperial Navy vessel. With their every weapon being a handcrafted weapon made by the finest artisans, the Custodes boast the most impressive armory within the whole Imperium, and are one of two organizations to have access to the Emperor's personal vaults, the others being the Sisters of Silence. Having access to whatever weapons the Custodes desire, in this video we will cover the standard loadouts seen on most of the Custodes range, their Vexillas, the Misericordia, Guardian Spears, Adratic weapons, and of course, their armor. The Guardian Spear is the signature weapon of the Custodes and their badge of office. It is one of the most elegant and deadly weapons within the Imperium, as it combines a potent power blade with the most advanced bolter technology so far produced. In the hands of a Custodian, a Guardian Spear is a blur of death, as it strikes and parries at blinding speeds. On occasion, there have also been Guardian Spears replacing their bolter for a Melta-gun, or a Dratic Destructor, reserved only for the most deadly of foes. A subtype of the Guardian Spear is the Paragon Spear, who manages to be even more deadly and are all ancient relics, wielded by only the best shield captains and the tribunes, some believed to be from the Golden Age of humanity, predating even the Unification Wars. With such crazy weapons, their armor of course is something that needs to match their grandeur. Made from Aramite worth the ransom of an entire world, the Custodes enter battle in the pinnacle of armor. Aramite has only been used rarely outside of the Custodes, such as the armor worn by the Emperor himself, Rogel Dorn, and maybe even Sanguinius. To further protect and enhance a Custodian, his personally crafted suit contains refractor field generators and advanced proximity sensors. The final note of their armor is the fact that when Custodes earn new names, it is carved on the inside of their armor, and sometimes even microscopically lasered into their bones as well. Alright, time for a fun one. The Misericordia has a long and honestly terrible history on Terra, from before the Unification Wars. These deadly daggers and short swords were tools of oppression, wielded by tyrants and ruthless warlords. Yet to the Emperor, he valued them, as back then, the Misericordia was also known as the Blade of Mercy. Within the ranks of the Custodes, these micromolecular dissonation blades are given upon completion of their training and hand-tailored to their unique grip. The Emperor hoped to change the outlook of the Misericordia by having only his custodians wield them after the Horus Heresy. But instead, they became synonymous with the terrible vengeance of the Custodes of what they would inflict upon the traitor Space Marines. The Vexilla Magisterium might on the surface seem like any other banner or standard, designed to inspire soldiers, but let me tell you, these Golden Eagles are insane. Several different Vexillas exist, ranging from the strength-enhancing Imperius to the massive refractor field generating Defensor, but the most deadly are the Vexilla Magnifica. Although every Vexilla is capable of sapping the energy, strength and resolve from an enemy force, and in turn empowering friendly soldiers to new heights of strength and bravery. The Vexilla Magnifica uses a mixture of light and sound to not only flashbang an entire army, but it is so potent it cripples the enemy mid-battle, turning them into easy targets. It should therefore not be surprising that each Vexilla is a handcrafted marvel of technology that took over a century to make by the Oathsworn artificers of the Tower Aquilane on Terra. Perhaps the scariest weapons fielded by humanity and my personal favorite. Adratic weaponry are potent relics from the Dark Age of technology, believed to be unique only to Terra. The unstable energy beams fired by these weapons sever the internal bonds of the matter, causing whatever they hit to unravel, and leaving only a flaring after-image of what once was. These weapons are rumored to sever the soul from the body, and therefore the Emperor fought hard to assure that every Adratic weapon within the galaxy was safely secured within his hands, because if this thing was shot at the Perpetual, it could kill them forever. Those who dared wield them against the Emperor during the Unification Wars would have their entire land and nation burned to the ground. Ever since, only his personal weaponsmiths have learned how to replicate these nightmarish guns, much to the annoyance of Mars, who really want to mass produce them. Fun fact for you, they are very similar to the Necron Gauss Blaster. Alright, that was the base lore, what they are like, and equipment out of the way. Let's see how strong they are in the novels. Similar to the Space Marines, Custodes have a wide range of vehicles to pick from, one of them being a goddamn dreadnought. But what's better than a dreadnought? A dreadnought killing actual millions of demons. Sagittarius was among the first 30 Custodes to have ever served the Emperor, and to be the first ever Custodes to be entombed within a dreadnought. The Emperor would personally carve, "Only in death does duty end," into Sagittarius' chassis. Later on, he would personally command elite Custodes and the other Imperial forces during the horrific war within the Webway, while the Siege of Terra raged in reality. The fighting was the fiercest the Imperium had ever seen, as demons dragged down titans by sheer weight of hundreds of thousands of clawing bodies. The Custodes were pressed to their very limit, and wounded unlike ever before. Sagittarius killed demons by the thousands. With his massive power fist and Kyr's assault cannon, he made short work of anything that challenged him. Under his command, the Custodians fought non-stop for 293 hours against an unending swarm of demons. Master-wrought weapons dulled into crude, ruined pieces of metal. Sagittarius fought until the Emperor finally arrived to end the war, and the ancient dreadnought nearly fell at the hands of the Archimandrite, who was a living avatar of the Unmaker god. By some miracle, Sagittarius was saved by Arch and land. Okay, Custodes versus Demons, check. Now let's have a look at some Custodes versus demonic Astartes. The Emperor had assigned a group of 5 Custodes to watch over Lorgar and his legion after the burning of Monarchia. The first of their number died on Cadia, sacrificed to the Dark Gods unbeknownst to the others. Another died when fighting Incarnadine, a conqueror-class robot who ambushed the Custodes when they sought to slay Cyrene. During the wider fight, the 4 Custodes had butchered half the ship's crew before leaving. Their gunship, however, would be shot down and crash on Istvan 5, where they would face 11 of the demonically possessed Galfarbak, who sought to avenge the death of Cyrene. The 3 remaining Custodes slew 4 of the word-bearers, before Neuralis fell when he was decapitated by the traitor Malnor and was forced to chop the body to pieces when it refused to die. Sikar was the next word-bearer to fall at the hands of Aquilin, who in turn was killed by Argol Tal. The last Custodes, Citran, who had sworn an oath of silence, was the last to stand. He removed his helmet when the final 6 Galfarbak charged, and he simply hurled his guardian spear at one of them. Citran had smiled as the other 5 descended upon him. He considered his vow of silence complete given the circumstances, and he laughed at the warriors he'd killed.
I always hated you, Zephan.
Now for some more loyalist on loyalist action. Did you know a single Custodes absolutely slaughtered a squad of Dark Angel Deathwing, some of the most elite Astartes to have ever existed? When a squad of the Deathwing most elite pursued the fallen angel Cypher on Terra, the squad of 10 led by a librarian ran into the Custodes Shadowkeeper known as Hackeron. The Astartes hesitated before opening fire on the Custodes, hoping to silence him on the fact that the Fallen existed. Although both sides were loyal to the Emperor to an extreme, the Deathwing would stop at nothing to pursue the Fallen, and the Shadowkeeper would not accept the trespassing of the Imperial Palace. In less than 6 seconds, Hackeron killed 6 Astartes until the librarian finally unleashed his powers to stop the Shadowkeeper in his tracks, yet he still moved, pushing his will over the insanely powerful Psyker. Librarian Mordaki felt blood vessels in his throat and skull burst, as the Custodian resisted, until 2 missiles struck Hackeron right in the chest, and the rest of the squad fired their bolters dry into him. He was still twitching afterwards, and made a full recovery. Okay, so Custodes against individual warriors is generally no problem, but what about millions upon millions of enemy combatants? A high fleet swarmed for the world of Logue 2, a death world with no population, but the Custodes came from the Golden Light. 6 Wardens under Shield Captain Tamerlane arrived in orbit. The Terra Nostra and her escorts were destroyed, but it mattered not. The Aramite casket they brought would be a beacon for reinforcements. The Custodes knew they had to be a bulwark on which to break the endless swarm, and constructed a crude fort of basalt and obsidian. When they placed the walls they would defend, a multi-million strong horde of bioforms came. An endless tide of carnage would be pushed back by bolter and blade. For hours the swarm gained nothing, they could not break the golden circle. As night came, the Custodes would face lightning storms and volcanic eruptions as the hype ships forced the world into an apocalypse. Lictors and warriors swarmed in the night only to be met with defeat. To the Custodes, their fort of stone and corpses was no different than the Eternity Gate. Dranax died first after repeated blasts of bioplasma. The smaller creatures gave way to hordes of Carnifexes who would still be beaten back. Even when rock slides and landslips buried thousands of Tyranids, the Custodes fought unshaken. Khalid died next, cooked alive by a zoanthrope who fell moments later by Varamach and Natrius. The final 3 Wardens held until the Swarmlord himself came. It would kill both Varamach and Natrius, and it would duel with Tamerlane. The Swarmlord would lose its limbs, but when it saw victory after disarming Tamerlane, it would only taste bitter defeat in the form of a Misericordia. After beating the Swarmlord, Tamerlane looked skywards to see the arrival of an Astartes chapter. The remaining High Fleet was destroyed, and when the Astartes landed, they would be given the tools to create Primaris Marines by Tamerlane, which were contained within the Aramite casket. Now for our last excerpt, something personal. I absolutely love the Thunder Warriors. Let's talk about Primarch Ushitan versus Constantine Valdor. The Custodes were vital in the destruction and betrayal of the Thunder Warriors at Mount Ararat. Yet the great clash of Custodes versus Thunder Warrior would come when High Lord Kandawire and Primarch Ushitan sought justice for the crimes committed against the Thunder Warriors. Instead of confronting the Emperor, Ushitan and his legion would face Valdor as he personally led the very first and yet unnamed Astartes into battle. Ushitan could down any angel of death who stood between him and Valdor, yet each landed a blow before falling. It might have taken dozens of angels, but Ushitan would have died from 1,000 cuts at some point, like wolves dragging down a bear. When the weapons of Valdor and Ushitan clashed, the kinetic release flattened a dozen warriors in every direction. The 2 giants were testing one another, hacking into each other and parrying deadly slashes. Valdor ripped a pauldron from Ushitan's armor and nearly took his head along with it. Ushitan was bleeding, slowly losing, yet he still pushed Valdor back for a moment. After verbal retorts and parries, Valdor found a weakness in Ushitan's arm and aimed an atom-perfect blow crashing into the Primarch's breastplate. Valdor slammed him down into the snow. After a final back and forth, where Ushitan verbally wounded Valdor, the last Thunder Warrior Primarch died as a last mercy pierced his heart. Now for the power skill level. For 40k we used a definitely scientifically proven rating of 40 Warhammers. If a Guardsman is 1 Warhammer, a Space Marine equals 10 Warhammers, and the Emperor of Mankind is about 40 Warhammers, how many hammers can we give to the Custodes? As shown by the lore and excerpts we have covered today, Custodes are easily the most insane warriors employed by the Emperor. While they might not be a titan, their presence on the battlefield surely is felt as one. However, Custodes remain far from unbeatable, yet every successful hit on them is paid for with 1,000 casualties. A single Custodes, even on a bad day, can beat at minimum 3 Astartes even when ambushed. With such mighty one-man armies, it leaves us wondering how the Horus Heresy would have ended if the 10,000 warriors were not bogged down in the webway, where they lost most of their warriors. And with that, I give the Custodes 25 out of 40 Warhammers. There truly exists no better bodyguards within the grim darkness of the far future, and it is no wonder the Emperor chose them as his personal companions. And that does it for today. Which Custodes excerpt is your favorite? Do you think I should have given the Custodes a higher or lower score? If you guys know of any more excerpts or crazy Custodes feats, post them down in the comments section below. I would love to read them and learn even more about these living godlike combat monsters. And that concludes my overview of the relevant lore about the Adeptus Custodes. Once new lore is released by Games Workshop, I will be sure to create more content on that. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the subscribe button. If not, that is completely fine. And I wish all of you a great day.